You are live. We're talking ice here before the show.
Yep. Talking about how to make ice.
Yeah, how to make ice. When was ice first
A cool
industrially
conversation we're
manufactured?
having.
We don't know. It's time for the drive at 5 with Captain Jared and the Zoo Crew. We're waiting for Paolo. He's
Okay.
getting home from work and having himself a little meal. Meanwhile, we're talking ice. Iceman can just make it, but we can't.
There you go.
And how nearby to me, actually, not only was ice made in my town, but bricks. Haverstraw, New York, was really big for bricks
Gotcha.
for 100 years. A lot of New York City, Brooklyn was built with Haverstraw bricks.
Right.
Send them down the river to New York and build stuff with them.
Yeah, I imagine, at a certain time it was far more effective to float stuff down the river than it was to carry it on land.
Yeah. Yep. The Hudson. Send it down the Hudson. That's why New York is where it is, all those rivers around it.
Yeah. So all the major cities in the world, with a couple of exceptions,
Yeah.
are around major rivers.
Mm-hmm. New York had the ocean and rivers. That's why
Mhm.
during the Revolutionary War, the British tried to get West Point and Fort Ticonderoga so they can control the Hudson.
Right.
Because at that time, New York State was kind of the center of the 13 colonies geographically, so that everything that went from the northern to the southern states went up the Hudson River.
Right.
So that Maine is way up there. So, and as far
Because
south as it went was what, the Carolinas?
at that time, it's
Yeah,
South Carolina or Georgia, one of the two.
yeah. I don't.
Florida was still in
Yeah, Florida
Spanish
was
possession.
Spanish, wasn't a state.
Mhm.
So it was like the Hudson River was really central to the 13 colonies.
Right.
It's interesting to think of that now, because we certainly don't think of the Hudson River as central anymore to anything, except New York State.
A lot of people think that the first colonized settlement from England was when they came over in the Mayflower, and that's not correct.
No,
It was Jamestown in 1607.
right. And before that was the one that didn't stick, that gets on all the mystery shows. Roanoke. There we go.
Oh, and there was Chinese people in the West Coast far before that, and Vikings all over the place.
No. Roanoke was an English settlement that
Yeah, I know.
got wiped out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Disappeared. That's why it's on all the mystery shows. That no one knows what happened to it.
I need to see some kid, going into class one of these days and tell that it was told that Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. And he's like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Not even close.
So, did you read any comics this week?
No, I did not. I
did
have
not.
been looking hard into getting some new war games this week, so that's pretty much what my whole week is.
War games. What kind of war games?
Most of them are historical simulation games. Where did my window go? Hold on. Just lost my window. Most of them are historical simulation games at different time frames and periods, like World War II, Middle Ages, various and sundry other stuff. So.
Do you have a group you can game with locally?
Yeah, I could.
Do you?
Not since COVID hit.
Oh, that's right. War games, Comic Rack likes them too. Yeah. I forgot about COVID. I just have never had anybody locally who I know who games. I know I could go to some gaming store or something and pick up a game, but I've just never.
That's they generally tend to have communities that pop up, kind of like comic book shops.
Yes, that's what I figure. Like my friend Dave, who's a letterer, he like taught his kids to game. So he's been playing games with his kids for, they're adults now, but he's been playing
Right.
with kids and their friends too, I think. So he built his own gaming community out there,
That's
and
cool.
he moved out to Pennsylvania.
Right. Gaming cafes are kind of a thing that seem to be getting more popular, where you'll have a person that will open like the cafe that's, say, 10 to 20% coffee shop and 90 to 70% game store.
Yeah. Wizard used to have a gaming store near me. I haven't been there. I don't know if it's still there because I haven't been there in a decade.
Right.
But Wizard, who started the magazine, they started as a local comic shop near me. Ended up I think their comic shop is in business, but it's like they were never my local comic shop, so I never went there regularly. I'd only go there every once in a while, and now I haven't been there in a decade. But when I was last there, they had kind of like a big gaming place in there too. They had a whole big, room for gaming that they.
Yeah, man. A lot of smaller comic shops really survived on Magic the Gathering in the
Oh
90s.
yeah, that is true. They can make some money selling Magic cards and stuff like that. Someone I remember my LCS owner talking to me about that probably about 3-4 years ago. He just does comics, and it's really part-time for him. He's got a full-time job, but he does his full-time job remotely even before COVID, coding job. So the comic shop's only open 3 days a week now, I think. But one guy came by who used to run a gaming store, but he closed his gaming store, and he was telling Roy that, if he wanted to do Magic the Gathering, he'd set it up for him and how much money he could make a year. But Roy was just like, too much effort. Roy already had a full-time job, so he wasn't looking.
Something like that is a lot of effort. He's not wrong.
Yeah. And he's like, I'd have to hire someone and be open all the time. And he's like,
And you're dealing with different distribution chains than you do with comics too.
Yeah. And there's a lot of gambling that goes into Magic the Gathering too. Running a local, I used to play Magic the Gathering in the 90s, and I watch one Magic the Gathering channel is on my YouTube list that I check out.
Right.
And he's a big time Magic the Gathering guy. He invests in old boxes and stuff.
Right.
But he also, it's the Magic the Gathering stores have razor thin margins, so it's not easy to do, especially since Amazon has moved into the Magic the Gathering space in the last 5 years.
Right.
So it's like you can get a box of Magic the Gathering cards on Amazon now for as cheap as you can get them anywhere, of course. So.
Yeah.
So that's really affected a lot.
Yeah, I just saw a video earlier today from a guitar shop.
Yeah.
Warning people that sometimes that if you order certain brands of guitar strings on Amazon, you run the risk of getting counterfeit strings.
Oh yeah.
Because Amazon allows just anybody to sell.
Right.
And sometimes counterfeits make their way in there. So
you never know.
Kind of interesting.
You run that risk on, eBay too. I just got a book on eBay that I don't think the guy's ever going to send to me.
The only problem I've ever had with eBay has actually just been with the post office misdelivering things.
Hello, Urza and Tolari. Good evening.
Okay, he's got me stumped here. Who are Urza and Tolari?
Urza is I know is a Magic the Gathering one. Tolari must be too, but I don't recognize that one. But Urza I recognize because that's old school. But yeah, I just got I actually had I had a problem just last year with an eBay thing, in that I bought some negatives. Sometimes I buy like
about that. Yeah.
Right, and then I just didn't send them. I got my money. 7 days later, I put in a claim and got my money back. But I was like, what? He had 10,000 feedback, all positive. I guess he just didn't like the price he had to sell them for, so he just didn't send them.
Or maybe he got, the age of COVID, he didn't want to go to
No, I think this was it may have been during COVID. I don't even remember.
Oh, okay.
It was either it could have been. No, I just think some of those guys, if they don't like because there's no downside to them, because if they refund your money, you can't leave them bad feedback.
Right.
It's like the transaction never existed. So they can just do nothing. eBay will refund your money, and there's no harm. I just got I was just looking by there's a book by Mark Rothko. He's a painter. I forget what the name of the book is, but it was written, I think, in the 60s. I think he died in the early 70s. Mark Rothko is like Philosophies of Art or something.
Yeah.
It's not even actually supposed to be a very good book. It doesn't get good reviews, but it's been like on my Amazon wish list for a decade.
Yeah.
But I just never wanted to spend $25 on it. I never was interested in enough $25. Every now and then I look for it, check the price, and I always go, some other day. But I looked on eBay this time, and somebody had a copy of it. It was the buy it now was $10. So of course they're not looking for a lot of money for it.
Right.
But it was $1 starting bid. Plus, I think $5 shipping it was. I'm like, you know what? I'll pay $6 for it.
Yeah.
If I bid on it, 90. Of course, no one else wants this book. No one's looking for a Mark Rothko book from the 60s. Well, this one's actually, I think this printing is from the is 20 years old, not 50. Gotcha. I think it said the printing is like 2002 or something. This printing. So I bid on it. Of course, I won it because everybody else has it up for $20, and I'm sure they don't sell it.
Right.
And it's been 3 days now. Paid for it. No, usually you pay for something, and within a day you get a message that it's shipped. No message, no nothing. I'm just like, you know what? I think this guy really doesn't want to sell it for $1. And I don't blame him, but
it's hard to tell.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll let you know.
I mean, there's so many variables why somebody ship something on time.
The only reason I say that is because it happened to me fairly recently. It could just be he's out of town. I don't know. But like I said, I'm in no hurry. I'll just let it ride until.
I used to spend a lot of time looking for stuff on eBay, and I don't really do that much anymore.
I do every now and then. Like I said, last week I told you about me spending time looking for a CGC book. Which I've still never bought a CGC book.
Right.
What else was I just looking for? Oh, I was just looking for some Eclipse monthlies that I think I can't remember who. It may have been on Comic Crack's channel this weekend. Somehow, I think that. Oh, that's right. They were showing Epic. I think Sleepy Reader had gotten some Epic Illustrateds, and that's one I bought. I bought Epic Illustrated #2 as a kid, and I bought all of them after that. I picked up the first issue sometime, I think in the 90s even. It was like long after but that they were showing off Epic Illustrateds, and that brought into my mind. Do you remember the magazine Eclipse Monthly?
Yeah, I have a few of them.
Yeah, I have a few of them too, but I'm missing like 2 issues. And I was like, and as I was listening to their show, I was like, oh, let me see if those 2 issues are on eBay. And how much they go for. And they're not expensive. It's just that shipping one issue.
Right. Yeah.
With shipping, you'll end up paying $10 to $12 an issue. And I was like, you know what? Is this really worth $10?
It's more cost effective to buy multiple things now from somebody just to ship them.
Right. If you can find them in the same spot, but
right.
Something like that is kind of, not everybody has random issues.
I remember years ago when it's looking for CDs, you can buy like CDs for a penny.
Yeah.
Then pay $3.50, $3.99 for shipping. So effectively, you're paying like $3.50 to $4 for a CD. It's more expensive than that now, but still, it's like I bought a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, and I looked at that's something too. That you. Like mycomicshop.com, I might make a purchase from them, but they actually didn't have them, or they were even more expensive. I think they didn't have them, Eclipse Monthly. which I understand because I imagine they don't get those in a lot.
I remember when they were talking about Epic Illustrated. It's interesting because both Epic and Heavy Metal, the prices on those are all over the place.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you can find them dirt cheap, and other
Mm-hmm.
times you want how much? Really?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah, there's no consistency there. They're up and down all over.
Well, I think that's one of those things that I remember when Mile High Comics website first started 20 years ago or so. And Chuck Rosansky, who wrote about, because he writes an email every week. And I remember him writing about him starting that. And his whole idea behind that website, let's see, I am missing issues. I actually have them on my watch list of, come on, Jared, watch list. I think it's issues 4 and 8, but let me double check. It's issues 8 and 4 I'm missing of Eclipse Monthly, and it's $9.99 plus $4 shipping and $9.99 plus $5 shipping. So that's $30. That's $30 for 2 issues I'm missing.
Are they from the same vendor?
No, they're 2 different ones. That I just don't want them $30 worth. You know, it's just kind of like I want. I would just be filling in holes.
Did you ever go to the Koch, or I don't know, it's pronounced Koch, Koch warehouse?
The Koch. That's it. The Koch where they pop up. Okay.
Did you ever go there?
I've never been there. I've only heard of it. It's in Brooklyn, I think.
Yeah, I've seen some videos. It's impressive.
Yeah, so have I.
It's not as big as Mile High, but it's probably the East Coast closest equivalent of it.
Yeah. Exactly. $30 is steep for 2 of those. Exactly. That's why I never bothered with them. Well, I didn't bother with them when I was watching your show. It's just like, you know what? I don't need it. Because like I said, all I would be doing was filling 2 holes in my collection that I haven't even looked at those Eclipse monthlies in a while. I think I bought some 20 years ago from mycomicshop.com, and I haven't bought any since. So it's like, you know what? I really don't need to fill those 2 holes. Certainly not for $30. Maybe someday when I'm bored, but
you can get 10 more issues of Spawn for that.
Yeah, that's nearly a year's worth of Spawn. But it's interesting that Koch. When I heard about that Koch warehouse, I was wondering where it is, because I have friends who in the 90s they lived in a Brooklyn neighborhood called Carroll Gardens, which was near something called the Gowanus Canal. Okay. And the Gowanus Canal is a canal that runs through Brooklyn that, of course, was very busy back in the days when canals were busy. But for the last 80 years has been a stagnant, fetid waterway. I mean, just toxic. That would cost $1 billion to clean up.
Ouch.
So there was not much development along that canal except for warehouses. So it was really weird when we used to sometimes we used to be in another part of Brooklyn late at night at a party, and we used to walk back to their apartment in Carroll Gardens, and we'd have to walk across the canal and this warehouse district. And it was really strange because here we are in Brooklyn that's really crowded, in New York City that's really crowded. And these warehouses are just empty at night. It's eerie walking through them because there's nobody there. And it's just like, it's like a horror movie because 5 blocks that way, it's 2 a.m. and there are people everywhere and houses, and you see lights on and cars going by. Then all of a sudden you walk across the canal into this one area and there's just nothing but empty, but warehouses closed for the day.
And if you'd been in a Batman comic book, they would have been full of criminals.
Yes. Man, I'd love to go to the Koch warehouse. I've seen the same videos.
I would too.
Incredible. Yeah. But I wonder if that warehouse is one of those type of neighborhoods. Because I don't know the address of it. I'm going to look it up one day.
Not really sure what the rest of the neighborhood is like.
Yeah, because it's an actual warehouse. So, But I know they've cleaned up some of the canal because what happened is Brooklyn got even more expensive real estate. So people want to clean up that canal so that they can build housing near it and make millions and millions of dollars.
So there's actual good side to gentrification, I guess.
They might clean up that toxic canal, and it was toxic.
Yeah.
As toxic as you can imagine a canal being, that's the Gowanus.
I can imagine quite a bit. Yeah.
I still have all my Epic Illustrateds. I keep meaning to go back and reread them because I haven't read them since the 80s.
I think I'm missing about 5 or 6 from having a complete run of those.
Yeah, I never missed an issue. Didn't the Joker fall into that canal? He very well could have. That vat of chemicals he fell in was probably just a little more toxic than the Gowanus Canal. But you don't get superpowers if you fall in there.
Now, I wish there was a magazine that was as good as Epic Illustrated was.
Yeah.
I wish there was one like that these days.
I actually liked it better than heavy metal. I was never much of a heavy metal fan.
Heavy metal was better when it first started.
Oh, yeah, it was around first, of course.
Well, I mean,
I just never
went by. It just wasn't as good.
I wouldn't have started picking up heavy metal until the early 80s.
Okay.
And I don't think many people think the early 80s are the best period for heavy metal.
No, the glory years of heavy metal, like up to about 1980 or so.
Yeah. And I was just never a fan of the writing of the stuff I picked up in the early 80s. I just never found it. The art was always solid, but I just never found it particularly well written. So, there's Paolo.
Good evening.
Good evening, Paolo. How are you doing?
Why you're talking like a vampire, Paolo?
Well, I shouldn't be talking like a vampire. I didn't really eat meat. So.
What color was that wine you had? What color was that wine that you had?
I always have red wine.
There you go. Red wine.
Red wine.
Red wine. You make me feel so fine.
No.
Didn't some member of UB40 die recently? I remember reading that.
Last month.
They did.
Yeah, they said an original member.
So. No.
I don't know what that means. I haven't listened to UB40 since like the late 80s.
You're a fortunate person.
Well, all you need to do is tune into an oldies station. Apparently, 80s music is now oldies.
No, of course.
Actually, no. For 15 years, My Heart Will Go On has been in the oldies station.
Ah. Speaking of oldies, I was watching. You guys know who Reaper Tate is?
Yep.
I was watching one of his. He's a YouTuber. He used to be on with ETA Nick a little bit.
Okay.
They used to have a Wednesday night show years ago. But I usually check out his videos. He's been on my subscription list forever. But he mostly is a back issue collector. He doesn't really collect current comics.
Gotcha.
But he did that thing that got me yelling at the screen again when he was showing modern books that were good or something like that. And he showed a book from Teen Titans Annual 3 from 1983. It's like, I'm sorry, 1983 isn't a modern book.
It was 39 years ago.
Yeah.
That's not a modern book.
Well, that's funny because we kind of we have the modern age starting with Camelot 3000, and then everything since then is the modern age.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It drives me nuts. I mean, the 90s isn't the modern age anymore.
No.
These artificial categories we have they're silly if you think about it.
Completely.
They don't make any sense.
Right, and they are completely based on superheroes, but
right.
I'm having a hard time convincing anyone that we need to change them.
Yeah, because we got gold, silver, bronze, and modern age.
Platinum.
Sometimes people use copper, but just sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And platinum going back before that.
Yeah, because apparently Superman was important enough just because he was a superhero. Even though comics existed for years.
There is a digital age, just not in comics.
Mm.
I mean, I could see, breaking them down by decade. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. There are two events in the 1950s which are important in the way that comics are made. One is the 32 pages becoming the norm, which happens around 1951, and the other one is the introduction of the Comics Code. And Jamie Colville's old site is still available if you look for it, and he does make he does use the kind of the dates that we use for the division between the golden and the silver age and the silver and the bronze age. He does use the introduction of the Comics Code and the 1971 revision as breaking points. It's just that we think it's the Flash that creates the silver age. No. It really isn't. It is the introduction of the Comics Code, because all of the cool comics die off, and that's why they bring back the superheroes.
They specifically tried to put EC out of business.
Exactly.
By banning all their titles.
They did a pretty good job of it too.
Yeah.
But then there are important things that aren't considered when you try to do the break with the ages. Like the emergence of the alternative comics movement in the 1960s is very important, but we focus on Conan or Gwen Stacy dying or the X-Men returning. Gwen Stacy dying, is that how you define the border between one cultural movement and another?
Right.
When character dies.
I actually there's a website I follow. I check out every now and then. That what's the name? It's like High Lowbrow or something like that. And the thing that got me looking at that originally was they had something a different breakdown on generations in America, rather than the normal ones we're used to seeing with boomers, Gen X, millennials. And I read, it must have been 10 years ago I first read this.
Yeah.
And
I've talked to this about this with a friend of mine, and that's the 60s. The decade of the 60s wasn't a decade; it was only 6 years. The 60s start when they shoot JFK, and end when Neil Armstrong lands on the moon.
He says something like that too. Not that exact thing, but he says, the 60s lasted from 61 to 73 or something like that. And he says, the 50s whatever his years were. I don't know what they were. But one of the things he did in breaking up the and he goes all the way back to the American Revolution and before then, in giving the names to the generations of men and his reasons why. It's a pretty interesting article. I've always liked it. And what he did was, and the one thing I remember was, and it like wasn't related to comic books and stuff. This particular website, it's related to culture, American culture and stuff like that. But the one thing he did, he put the end of whatever the generation was, or maybe it was the 60s that ended with Gwen Stacy's death. And I was like, what? I have never heard anyone reference Gwen Stacy's death. But he made an argument that was the end, sort of an end of cultural innocence, because an actual beloved comic book character could die. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'd never thought of that before, really. And because Gwen Stacy's death was a few years before me. That was the early 70s. I was really a late 70s kid comic book collector. So to me, Gwen Stacy was had died years before. But that people really got angry at Gwen Stacy's death.
So does that mean 2 years from now, when Marvel decides to kill Spider-Gwen, that'll just start that cycle all over again?
No, because I think things have changed since then, and death doesn't matter anymore in mainstream superhero comics, especially. They were also talking again on Comic Crack's show about, and matter of fact, they had what's his name on? Gore Vidal was on with them.
Face reveal Gore Vidal.
Face reveal Gore Vidal. And Gore actually mentions me because I mentioned before that I gave up on Deadly Class. Which I almost never do. Once an indie comic is on my pull list, I almost never drop it because I buy comics because of who's doing them. And usually indie comics are done by the same guys from beginning to end. Not always, but usually at least one of the guys is there. You know, maybe the artist leaves, maybe the writer leaves. But so for me to drop an indie comic just never happens. But I ended up dropping Deadly Class because and Gore was saying it is a really good, you know, it's a really good book. It's a shame I don't read it anymore. And I'm like, you know what? I'm sure it is a really good book because I love the artist and I like the writer too. But it just became when they did the death fake out, because Deadly Class was a book that was about the stakes, the life and death stakes. And once they did the silly death fake out, I was just like, oh, death means nothing in this book. It's a Marvel comic. It's a DC comic. Death, they can bring anyone back from the dead at any time and say, oh, I gave him despite the fact that he was run through with a sword, I gave him a special herb that made him appear dead, but he really wasn't. Unless you get him to a surgeon, he's going to be dead. and that just and then I still read 10 more issues, but my heart just wasn't in it. I just didn't buy into it anymore.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what all Marvel and DC comics are. I don't buy into the stakes anymore because there are no stakes in Marvel and DC, despite the fact that they make everything, you know, reality. Oh, our whole reality could die if this happens. No, it can't.
Yeah,
They've got another reality right next door that they'll boot right up for you.
Yeah, DC now the two biggest villains are the Batman Who Laughs and Perpetua, whatever she is, because every menace now is looking to destroy the multiverse.
Yeah. Because that's the state. Bank robbers are just, you know, Batman beating up bank robbers. He just can't do it. That's not interesting.
Even Darkseid is a pussy now.
Yeah, but just the fact that they keep wanting to up the stakes means there's no stakes because there's no death. So how come
doesn't have a Thanos copter either?
Thanos copter. That's a classic. Speaking of a classic, being that I've been working on my Gatsby project, I got another book that I have to put a dryer sheet in. And then I got a beat up old copy of the actual novel, The Great Gatsby, because I wanted one I could mark up. So I said to myself, you know what, The Great Gatsby has been required reading in high schools and colleges in the U.S. for half a century now. I'm sure there are cheap used copies on eBay.
Yeah.
Sure enough. $4 shipping including. I got a copy. Matter of fact, I got Madison Newell's copy. Madison Newell. Let's see where. Madison Newell, 2013 English. Oh, and she's even got some notes in here. I'm like, oh, cool. I can get some high schoolers.
Have you ever looked at a book that's annotated by somebody else like that and looked at the notes and like, they're just completely wrong? What the hell they were thinking, but this has nothing to do with.
I have never done that, but I look forward to it with this one. Like I said, I wanted a battered old copy that I could annotate.
Right.
Does that thing have those? Does that thing have red ink on top of the pages?
Oh, you're talking about a remainder mark?
No.
Yeah,
no.
Looks like it. Nah, just looked like it. Yeah, okay. But looked like it from
red ink on the side where she wrote her name on the side of it. As high schoolers sometimes do.
That's classy there.
Wait, that must have been her grandfather's copy because that's too old to look like 2013.
Yeah. Well, it's got the original cover on it. Let's see what the printing date
is. The cover intentionally aged?
No, I just think it's just battered.
Okay.
Just completely. I had to wash the cover and the back cover. Even though it's paper, it had filth all over it.
Gotcha.
Let's see. This is a 2004 edition.
Really?
It's the 32nd printing.
Okay. Yeah, and they didn't change the design in 32 printings?
Not for the
Oh,
official
there's
one.
been other printings
No.
that had different.
Yeah, there have been fancier
That's the
printings, but this is the
plastic
basic one,
cover.
right?
Yeah, but
But
that one? I mean,
he
look at the back cover. Show the back cover. Who the hell? Nobody designs covers like back covers like that in 2004.
Yeah,
now this is probably no, it's got a new font on it, it looks like. Who knows?
but see, Jared, this is how it starts because I'm a book collector too. The next thing you do, you're going to start looking for an advanced reader copy that was published back in the day. And it's going to snowball from there.
Well, hold on. First, let me. What was I about to say? Oh, darn it! I just forgot what I was about to say. Oh well.
It's all right.
I was going to say he never got a second printing in his lifetime. That
happens.
Fitzgerald and this book were almost forgotten when he died.
H.P. Lovecraft was completely forgotten about when he died.
Yeah, it was only afterwards that he.
Yeah.
There's a little multiplication. I don't know if you can see. There's a little light pencil multiplication going on in the back too. I don't know what that has to do with Gatsby. But she's dividing 180 by 7. 25.71 is the answer, in case you want to know what 180 divided by 7 is.
Well, at least she knew how to do it by hand.
Oh, you know what that is? 180 school days a year. Divided by 7 weeks. I think she got her math because there's only 5 days a week in there. But that's got to be 180 school days a year.
Or it could be 7 hours a day.
So she's seeing exactly how many weeks of school it is. That's what it is. Oh, 25.71 weeks solid straight through. It would be of school. That's what she's figuring out.
Right.
That's funny. Anybody who is a school kid in the U.S. knows there's 180 school days a year. She was figuring out how much of her life she was wasting in school.
If you got a hold of one of our school textbooks or something like that back then, you would have had drawings of band logos in them.
You know, it was big I remember this, especially in grade school and junior high, drawing World War II dogfights between planes.
Oh, hell yeah.
That was, I don't know if kids still do that.
I don't know if they still do it. I don't know if I've told you guys this story or not, but do you remember the show Black Sheep Squadron? It was the original incarnation was Baba Black Sheep with Robert Conrad.
Right.
That came on when I was in 2nd grade, I think it was. Yeah, I was 7. So 2nd grade. If you didn't want, and if you're one of the male kids and girls who don't care about World War II,
they were doing their own thing.
Okay. If you didn't watch that show when it came on that week, you were out of the conversation the entire next day. And you would go to both the elementary school library and the public library. And, you know, where you'd have the slips in the back where you'd write your name in it, where you'd check out a book. You could see where all your friends would have read the same book. So there were a lot of little 7-year-old kids running around knowing a lot more about World War II fighter planes than they had any right to. Yeah, we would draw that kind of stuff all the time.
Dog fights between fighter planes.
Yep. We had to read a book in the 11th grade, which is kind of a commentary on the end of the Edwardian age, but it's set in it's by a Portuguese author and set in Portugal, and the story does have incest. But the thing that all the students remember about it is the first chapter, which is nothing but a complete description down to every bit of every rug and everything covering the tables about the house, every room in the house, every bit of tchotchkes that's used as decoration. That's what we remember. Then there's incest.
It just struck me.
That, but man, that was one hell of a rug, you know.
I wonder if Madison Newell is related to Mindy Newell.
Don't know.
Who worked with me at Marvel as an editor and also wrote some stuff. She wrote before she worked at Marvel, a Lois Lane miniseries, I think in the late 80s. I forget who drew it. It was like a 2-part Lois Lane miniseries I remember her writing that I enjoyed.
Maybe Madison will knock on your door one day and ask for a book back.
Like my cousin, she's gonna show up and my cousin Mindy said you have my book. Can I have it back?
Jeff Sebesta told me I should look her up on Facebook and tip her for the annotations.
That would be a little weird.
But I did also. Amazon had a buy two get one free sale, so I finally picked up the Great Gatsby graphic novels that I took out of the library,
Right.
which are just okay. This is the one by who drew this one? But K. Woodman Maynard. Like I took these out of the library last year, and they're both solid, but not spectacular. The one that's being done now by the Portuguese artist and by Cloverleaf Press is much better than these two.
Oh, the one that you never pronounced quite correctly, according to Paulo.
Yes. Coelho.
He's not getting bells, is he? Yeah.
Close. I was close. And that was just through memory. I didn't even see it.
Now, you're getting close when you're talking about André Lima Araújo.
Oh, yeah.
But we still have to work on Jorge Coelho.
Jorge Coelho. And this is the other one, which is by, who did this one? Fred Fordham. Once again,
that's decent art.
They're both solid, but not spectacular. But I wanted to add them to the collection because I'm working on my own Great Gatsby illustrations. So I wanted these two lying around too.
We'll
and
see
like,
after
one of the
that.
things, in doing my own Great Gatsby illustrations, I'm thinking about things like they quite often have like the two lead characters, Daisy and Jordan, and the story took place in 1924, sort of drawn as flappers. That they kind of have 1920, but
that's pretty much what's the.
But I think the problem with that is they were the uber rich. The uber rich weren't flappers.
Right.
They were conservative.
But I think the whole flapper hairdos and style, especially, is kind of a default for anybody who does anything with New York in the 20s.
Yeah, that's it.
Not everybody was a flapper.
Right. Not everybody was. And I especially think he gave her this isn't quite a flapper hairdo. He gave her this floppy, rounded hair. This is more like the long hair I was just looking up 1920s hairdo. They had like long hair that was also like curled all the way up and shaped into short hair. But it's like, I'm resisting drawing them as flappers. And the men all just wore suits.
Now you can start collecting foreign editions with different covers. See, this is how it starts. It becomes a sickness.
But thanks to Mind the Comics there, I was drawing something where I was drawing sort of not quite realistically, but a men's sleeve with a cufflink on it. And I was like, I have no idea which side the cufflink goes on.
That's what I was going to ask.
I'm like, I'm going to have to look that up. Otherwise, Gus is going to be yelling at me that I got the cufflinks wrong, going in the wrong direction.
You should be able to find photographs of that fairly easily.
I'm going to have to, because it's just, let me show you. I was working on the pencils for this is my Gatsby party scene I was working on the pencils for. This crazy thing. But right down here, I have a hand with a cuff. I think I'm going to draw a cufflink on, but I'm like, I got to reference that because I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't think the cufflink's going through the cuff properly. I'm going to have to look up how. Oh, that's right. It's not, because I have the cufflink straddling the cuff, and it goes through like a button. So there shouldn't the line of the cuff should not be through the middle of the cufflink like I did. I put it on like a staple.
I always just rolled my sleeves up. was trying to think. Have I ever? I think I've used cufflinks like once in my entire life.
Well, we have buttons, so we don't need cufflinks.
Right.
I wonder if shirt collars were still around then. Arrow collars.
Oh yeah.
Because shirts used to not come with collars because of all the soot, they'd get dirty. So arrow collars were like collars you'd put on your shirt to keep your shirt clean. Right. I wonder when they went out of fashion and shirt collars came in. I have no idea.
Let's find out.
I have thing called the collars. I'll just guess. Oh, cufflinks. Cufflinks are shown to the outside. Okay, so they'd be like a button, and the cuff is not overlapped. It makes a kind of V. I'm gonna have to look down. I'm gonna have to look that up because I have no idea. And as I was drawing it, I'm going, I know I'm getting this cufflink wrong. I know I'm doing it wrong.
J.C. Landecker was the primary person that popularized the arrow collars.
Who was?
Landecker.
Oh yeah, he was the illustrator. And like I said, that was the days when illustrators were rock stars.
Yeah, in the 20s is when they started becoming popular.
In the teens, illustrators were popular in the teens too.
Right.
They were like when the main form of visual communication was TV and magazines and newspapers. So that's where if you saw an image, it was done by an illustrator. You know, there was no TV, there was no video. Right. So they were and people knew who they were, who drew their favorite. You know, you'd tear your J.C. Landecker page out of your magazine and hang it up.
The original posters.
Yeah. They actually sold prints of them. Remember when we were talking about, who was I? This guy right here.
Oh, the precursor to Vargas.
Yeah, the Petty, George Petty.
I'll start to say Tom.
Yeah, they would in the 30s. They'd package his stuff as prints too for people to buy.
Portfolios.
Yeah.
Just
portfolios in our day were as niche as it gets.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have a run of 2,000 Neil Adams, Michael Golden portfolios.
Right.
You know, they'd have runs of 100,000.
You should go to Neil Adams and ask him. You know his theory about the Earth expanding, right?
Oh yes.
Ask him why your portfolio hasn't gotten bigger as time has gone by. It's the same size.
It has gotten bigger. You just can't tell.
Sure, I can't tell.
Oh, and the third book I got, because it was buy two get one free. I picked up a copy of that Kurt Vonnegut Slaughterhouse 5 by the graphic novel adaptation with Ryan North and Albert Montes. This is the one I read digitally a few weeks ago. That was really good.
Mm-hmm. Hold the cover back up there for a second. Hold the cover. Front cover. That's a very Saul Bass kind of graphic there.
Yeah, definitely.
Looks neat. Yeah.
Harkens back. Well, when was this? Was this written during the 60s or the 50s?
Ooh, one of those two.
I don't know when Slaughterhouse 5 was written, but it could be that he's harkening back to that era. Oh, but this only came out in 2021 too. This graphic novel adaptation, so it's new. Oh, it's by Boom.
It was originally published in 1969.
Okay, so that's the height of Saul Bass. So the original might have a lot. I'm not sure who did the cover of the original, but that's Saul Bass was a 60s guy, I think, right?
The 60s and early up through the 70s too.
Yeah, I mean but he became big in the 60s, I think.
Yeah.
I remember. He did movie titles too, right?
Yeah, that's what he's primarily known.
Yeah. Well, I know he did design too, but
He
this is
directed,
really,
he
really
directed
good.
a couple movies. But yeah.
This is a grade, easily a grade above the two Great Gatsbys. It's just well done. So I'm glad I got this.
Has anybody written a sequel to The Great Gatsby?
Not yet. Give them time. Actually, no, there have been some. There have been some prequels and sequels, that unofficial ones that people have written over the years. Like
That's
I was reading that.
That's what you're going to be reading next. I know how these things go. I've been there.
I was thinking about that. Then I read the reviews of them.
Right.
Like there's one, the most famous of them is by some author who did like story about Nick, the narrator during the war years, and it's not well received. What do we got here?
Right.
I was looking at a Poirot comic last. Nice clothes throughout until he's in fancy Oriental pajamas. Artist must have found female pajamas and obviously copied buttons on the wrong side. Oh,
I love that Gus has got this hang up about the buttons on the wrong side of things. It just cracks me.
Hey,
I love
he's
it.
got me. He's got me looking up how cufflinks are going to work.
He has a point. You know,
Out of the but we've been having that Agatha Christie comic adaptation collection, and this, I think this is the third Poirot book, and this is the one with the worst art.
Monster Incorporated movie titles were based on Saul Bass. Yeah, prequels make sense. Yeah, for the Gatsby.
I wonder
it does.
You're talking about Poirot and Agatha Christie adaptations or comics. I don't think anybody's ever done Brother Cadfael for comics.
No, not that I know of. But there's just a billion British detectives these days on TV shows.
Well, yeah.
There's like endless amounts. There was actually a TV show in the 70s that I saw 10 years ago, maybe. A British show called The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. And it adapted a bunch of stories that came out at the same time as Sherlock Holmes stories were written. And they were actually pretty good. I mean, if you like 1970s British BBC mysteries, they were actually pretty well done. The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes.
Most BBC series, I'll give the benefit of a doubt because they're usually done pretty decently. There's some exceptions.
Meanwhile, I go crazy over writers who don't know the difference between star systems and galaxies. Yes.
Yeah.
Skinks forward in the house. All right. And he tells us star systems, not stat systems. We knew that. I heard him complain about that before.
Make a
another writer.
All the discrepancies, then it becomes a stat system.
There was a TV miniseries adapting the ABC murders with John Malkovich. That was the least convincing Poirot I've ever seen. And that is, of course, because John Malkovich only knows how to play one character, who is John Malkovich.
It's kind of like Sam Jackson always plays Sam Jackson.
That reminds me of, what was I watching? Didn't Kenneth Branagh, didn't he do Murder on the Orient Express? That was
that was terrible. Besides making it with modern sensibilities, they tried to turn me into an action hero with the opening gambit, and it's ridiculous.
I saw it a couple of years ago and don't even remember it.
What did you think of the what's the actor's name? God, I'm drawing a blank. This is what happens when you get old, folks. The guy played Robert Downey Jr. What did you think of his Sherlock Holmes movies?
I liked him as Holmes, but he's a modern Sherlock Holmes, you know?
He was very much an action hero.
Yeah. As an action hero, Sherlock Holmes went, he was fine. You know. At least they didn't make him drug addict, Sherlock Holmes. You know, that's the
easy
Sherlock
nowadays.
Holmes I've been tired of for a long time. But you know what? This just popped into my head. I'm a huge Miss Marple fan. She's my favorite of the Agatha Christie characters, and my favorite of the Agatha Christie books. And I like, I can't remember her name. She played Miss Marple in the 80s. Who I can't remember her name, but she did in the 80s and I think into the 90s. She played Miss Marple on the BBC A&E productions. Really good. But there was one scene in that sticks with me more than anything else. In the they had her, and it was just such a poignant nostalgia that had like nothing to do with the rest of the mystery. It was Miss Marple was visiting some of her, and for those who don't know, Miss Marple is a little old lady.
Right.
So she's, I don't know, in her 60s up, who knows. She's sort of the ageless little old lady. A detective.
There's two of them that come up here. One's Geraldine McEwen, and the other one is Julie McKenzie.
I don't think it's either of those. I'll have to look it up who it is. But like I said, she played in the 80s, I think it was, or the 90s, one or the other. But I can't remember her name. Maybe it's one of those because I can't remember. But
Joan Hickson?
Yes, that's it. I think that's her. I think Joan Hickson is the one I like. But anyway, there's just this scene where like the mystery, she is visiting some of her friends who she's known they're all little old ladies,
right,
in some mansion somewhere, and there's a murder. She solves the murder. But anyway, at the end of the show, she and her friends they found like I think that it's set in like the 50s. So she and her friends discover that they have some old silent movies they took. It must have been in Paris, right, at like the turn of the century or whenever it took. Old. So it was just these three old ladies watching themselves in these silent movies from 40 years ago or something, and these flickering black and white and it was just like, and they're just they're getting tears in their eyes, and I'm just getting tears in my eye. It's just this one moment, like nostalgic sort of moment in the show that had nothing to do with the rest of the show that I always remember. It's just like, wow, time passes, doesn't it? Because they also they almost never reference Miss Marple being a young woman either. She's a little old lady. That's her character. It is a cool Holmes. The problem is Holmes himself in those movies. Yeah, I just remember them being okay.
Yeah.
I'm suddenly picking action.
There's too many Sherlock Holmes adaptations, but has anybody ever written? Has anybody ever written any Poirot stories like set earlier in his career?
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
There are a few mentions of Poirot fighting in World War I and then arriving in the UK as a World War I refugee, and his time in the Brussels police.
That just reminded me, Sleepy, of Selling Fiction Jared as an action, slinging paper and pen. It may have been in Raw. I can't remember. And it may have only been a faux cover, but there could have been a short little story that went with it. But there was something called Two-Fisted Painters. And it's just this, sort of cliche-looking painter with a beret and a beard. He's got brushes in his hand. He's like kicking ass in his studio.
He's got an outrageous French accent, right?
Yeah. But I was like, I never got I remember seeing it around, like I saw it like on the internet, but I never actually saw a copy. I always wanted to get Two-Fisted Painters, the comic, but I don't think it actually. I think it's like I said, I think it's just a couple of pages in an issue of Raw or something like that.
Speaking of,
I always wanted to get that.
Action hero painters. Did you know that Bob Ross was a drill sergeant?
Yeah. I remember hearing that about him.
Can you imagine him yelling at anybody?
And that fro was a perm. He just stumbled onto it, and that's when he happened to get popular, so he had to keep it.
It works.
Yeah. Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah, I liked I in general liked him. The only thing I didn't like in the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes is what they did with Irene Adler. I did not like they made her a dominatrix. And I was just like, really? That doesn't.
I'm just thinking of Holmes. I would really like to see an animated League of Extraordinary Gentlemen series done well.
You can put Gatsby in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen now if you want.
True.
Let's not overdo it.
Because it was ironic.
They stuck in the movie.
But he had lots of adventures in Europe during the war and after
Hmm.
World War I. So that's in the book. They mention that. We don't know if any of them are true or not.
I still want to read mainly Wade Wellman, who did the Silver John novels. He did a Sherlock Holmes story which set during the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. So I'd like to read that one of these days to see Sherlock Holmes fighting the Martians.
Sherlock Holmes versus the Martians. Elementary, dear Martian. Is hit by a death ray. Right. Martian death rays don't care how smart you are.
No, they don't. That's true.
Unlike the death rays in the Book of Boba Fett. Have you guys been watching that series at all? I'm not a big Star Wars guy.
I cut my Disney Plus subscription several months ago to save money. Okay. I like The Mandalorian a whole lot.
I did too.
But I have heard nothing but mixed reviews about the Book of Boba Fett.
I've enjoyed it, but like the I'm not a big Star Wars fan. The Mandalorian is the first Star Wars thing I've watched since Return of the Jedi. I just have not bothered. I'm not a Star Wars guy.
Yeah, I don't really care about what they do with Star Wars anymore. After the prequels, kind of lost interest. I already had lost interest. I was never that big on Star Wars, but to me, anything after Return of the Jedi is redundant.
Rogue One is decent.
In watching the final episode of Boba Fett, it was kind of like the A-Team when there's bullets flying and no one getting hit. Right. Because there's a big standoff, space, not ground battle going on. It's really a Western.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But they had these two big machines, with guns on them that, shot you. A bit sort of like, space 50 cal machine guns.
No.
And so all of our gang of heroes had to run away from them, as you might imagine. They got to run. You don't want to get shot by the machine guns.
Right.
But it's like they're running down the street. The machine guns are firing behind them. It's like there's 20 of them running, and the machine gun fire is all hitting behind them. I'm like, if the gunner just raised that gun, he could cut them all down.
They have plot armor.
So
not only do they have Mandalorian armor, but they also have plot armor.
Well, these weren't the Mandalorians running. These was normal people running, and it's and they were running. I'd be running those buildings. Running those get to cover, but for 10 minutes they were just running in the street with machine gun fire at their back of their feet.
Looks like cartoons are notorious for it, but I've seen a couple movies where if a tree is falling, the person doesn't move perpendicular to the tree to get out of the way. It runs in the same path that the tree is falling.
Right.
Dumb.
I imagine when I think about that though, what it is I've thought about that tree thing too. Disney doesn't doesn't like death very much. Yeah, exactly. That's like the A-Team. They didn't want people getting hit by those bullets.
Right.
As I imagine a tree really, really falls fast. So you've got
faster than what you see in movies.
Faster than what you see in the movie. So if you hear a tree falling, you got to look up, locate that tree, figure out which way to run, and then run that way. And you might not have that time, depending. So that's why I give them the doubt in those movies where trees fall on people and they can't get out of the way. I'm like, could I really get out of the way of a falling? And it also depends on which part. If you're dodging the trunk, that might not be too hard. If there's big, huge branches, that's a long way to run to get out of the way of that tree.
There, I agree with
you. But Boba riding a Rancor, that was cool. Art Spiegelman. Oh, it was Art Spiegelman who did Two-Fisted Painters. Oh, so that's an issue of Raw, right? Must be. I'm gonna have to find that, just because I always loved that cover, Two Fisted Painters, and I haven't seen it in years and years and years, so I'm gonna have to look it up.
So did you have the easel, the edge on the easel beveled to a razor tip, kind of like Odd Job's hat in James Bond? We just fling the easel and it would cut people down, like Captain.
That just reminded me too. There's a new Kristen Bell show that I've been watching, I think on Netflix, and it's a kind of a parody of Rear Window, and it's a real weird parody, because it's like sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's not. But like on the end of the episode I just watched, they took her away because they found someone. She's a painter, and they found someone who'd been killed with her palette knife. And I'm like, you can't kill anyone with a palette knife.
You have to put a lot of effort into it.
You could barely cut someone with it. For those of you who don't know, I had to show this to my sister as we were watching. And this is the palette knife she has. This is a palette knife. You can't stab anyone with that. And the edge is dull.
You could sharpen the edge and maybe slit their throat from behind with it. But
maybe you could do that. I don't know how you'd have a hard time, because this
would take a lot of preparation.
It would take a lot to slit someone's throat with a palette knife, and you definitely can't stab someone with a palette knife. It'll just bend and break. So I just found that funny, that someone was killed with a palette knife, so they suspect her.
It's unpalatable.
Your search might end up on some porn site. Hey, it's happened before.
Your artwork may end up on some porn site.
Speaking of artwork ending up on a porn site, I just discovered, I don't know how I never knew about this before, but I found it just this week. There are people who do porn parodies of Archie Comics covers.
Oh, there's people who do porn parodies of everything.
Yeah, but
I mean,
I've never seen that before. I'm sure there are, but that's just one specific thing I never existed.
Well,
I know what Paolo is going to say. I know most people who got money. Go ahead and say what you're going to say, Paolo.
Comics without context.
I was thinking the same thing.
You don't need parodies.
Yeah.
Some of those things just write themselves. You just take a certain panel out of context, like, whoa.
But no, there are people who actually turn the Archie pictures into dirty drawings and make covers. It's just like, it amused me to no end. I was looking at a bunch of them. Matter of fact, I have to go back. I didn't look at all of them. I have to go back and look at some more. I don't know why that amused me so much, but I found them this week. And I was like, oh, look at that. Because years ago, I did a couple of punk rock parody covers where I took one. It was one that was a Marvel love comic from the early 70s. Oh. And you take and you draw, and I redrew the characters as punk rockers, at least one of them. Like there was one where a girl was whose father was yelling at her for dating a punk rocker. And then there was another one I did, was a mystery in space cover. Mm-hmm. From like the 50s, where I can't remember what issue it was, but it had like this really cheesy drawing of a spaceship. And then there was like some alien ejecting himself from the spaceship. And it said something like, that alien is ejecting himself from the spaceship to save us. And I turned the alien into the punk rocker. So it became, that punk rocker is ejecting himself from the spaceship to save us. I only did a few of them, but it amused me for a moment.
What you just said reminded me, I have a couple of issues. There was a fairly obscure Marvel title. It was done in the late 80s, I think it was late 80s. It was called Young Yuppies in Love.
Oh, yeah. I was an indie comic.
All of a sudden, it just boop, there appeared in my brain, and I hadn't thought about that book for probably 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. That was like some sort of alternative parody comic, right? Who did that?
I can't remember the author's name. It was a female creator.
I remember it.
Was Anna Maria Be Cool? Was that it?
Okay, one of Art's mini comics. Ah, that's what Two-Fisted Painters was. I remember Anna Marie Cool from doing Barbies. Her and Amanda Connor were the two of the Barbie artists.
I can't remember.
They both did.
Barb
They
Castle,
both did.
maybe? I don't know.
They both did terrific covers on Barbie. I actually
Yep.
saved some of those just for the covers.
Yep, is From Hell by Barbara Slate.
Barbara Slate.
There's that one.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Barbara part, right? I hadn't thought about that book in years until you just mentioned that. Boom, there it appears in my
I remember.
brain.
I think there was a Yuppies in Love comic too, or at least a story somewhere.
Might have been.
DC had a comic called Young Heroes in Love,
Yeah.
which was a parody of superheroes in the form of a romance comic, or a parody of romance comics in the form of superheroes.
Oh, there was a strip they used to publish in Comic Buyer's Guide, and it eventually became its own book later on too. It was called Young Lust,
Oh yeah.
where it was almost an MST3K thing, where they would take art from old romance novels and write their own text to it, be kind of smarmy with it.
I bought one or two of those. They were not very good.
Okay.
I have friends who could do that a lot better.
Yeah.
They were just they were media. I mean, it's a neat thing, but they're kind of mediocre. A matter of fact, I bought another one like that recently. Not the Young Lust one, but another person doing sort of the same thing with some. Well, I can't remember the name of it. I maybe got it in the last 2 years. I ordered one just because I wanted to see what it looked like, kind of, and it was once again it was okay. Humor is a tough thing, especially doing something humorous like that.
Also, when you're trying to do humor that's not tied to the time period and make it more timeless. Because if somebody catches a reference to, I don't know, say like if you're 30, 40 years from now, you're reading a comic book and somebody puts a reference like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, are you know what the hell they're talking about? Probably not.
The Alex Toth Hot Wheels comics from the 70s are good, that DC published. Yeah.
Alex Toth, anything from the 70s.
Right. In the 90s, my friend Ed tracked down a bunch of those, so I was able to see them. And they're not easy to find, and they're not cheap.
No, they're not. That's true. That would actually make for a good reprint book. Now
There we go. The Toth issues of Hot Wheels, yes.
I did say to Charlton 66 that we should do a sort of contest in the Four Color Fossils. It brings up the Charlton racing car comics, and I'll show covers from the French Michel Vaillant series. Yeah. Although those comics were pretty good. You know, the guy who did Kid Cold Outlaw in the 50s. What was his name? He did those comics for Charlton, and he knew how to draw cars. And yeah, I've seen those covers. I can recognize the cars. I can see when he's drawing a Ferrari 250 LM, when he's got a Chaparral 2J, a Porsche 906. I can tell. They're actually good reproductions.
Has nothing to do with that. But speaking of guys that draw machinery well, Ian Kennedy died a few days ago. British artist, did a lot of science fiction comics.
Okay. Russ Heath did some Kid Cult, yeah.
Yeah, early in the 1950s, but it was not the historical artist. Damn, I forgot the.
I can Google it.
I'm already looking it up.
Russ Heath.
He
did some good stuff, that Russ Heath.
Extremely.
Including some good Roy Lichtenstein paintings.
Jack Keller. Jack Keller was the guy. Yeah. After he quit Marvel, he worked for a car dealership, and he was already for his brother's car dealership, and he was already doing those racing car comics for Charlton.
Ah, okay. Working for a car dealership, paid better than comics. That just reminded me. Did you see this week's Twitter controversy about Joelle Jones swiping? A DC artist swipes from a Marvel artist.
No, I hadn't heard anything about that.
They showed. You can go to Twitter and look up Joelle Jones swipes.
Yeah, Doesn't every comics artist swipe?
Well, hold
Is
on
that
a
a
second.
control?
No, hold on.
Jim
First
Morgan
of all,
doesn't swipe.
to me, my friend Ed had not on Twitter. Yeah, I'm on Twitter a little bit. But my friend Ed, it was also ended up because I think some site, maybe Comic Book Com or Breeding Cool or something, did a little article on it.
Mhm.
But my friend Ed had the best comment on it. He's like, well, if Marvel or DC would pay their artists more, they might have time to come up with their own imagery. And I was like, yeah, there's that. But it turns out, and they had, I think it was Joel Jones' Wonder Woman, and then some other guy's comic, and they had like two of the figures were exact swipes on the cover from this guy's stuff. But then I saw something else, and it turns out they're both. Here's something I didn't know existed. There are both swipes from reference. There's a site called it's either Master or Masters of Anatomy.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they sell books for comic book artists where they have all these figures and fight scenes worked out for you. And it's really well done. And they're done with sort of nude figures where you can just take the figures and draw the costume on them.
Superimposed stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of Japanese art books that have nude poses like that.
Yeah, I remember some of them from the '90s who had all sorts of pose, but these ones aren't even models posing. These ones are actual drawings with the anatomy all worked out for you. And it turns out both those artists used the poses from that book. LOL, he's not wrong. So it was just kind of fun, but that brought me up to the idea of artists and their references, because people were getting and of course Twitter was all a buzz with some people saying Twitter detectives shouldn't be tracking down artists' references, and some people saying these artists have something to answer for because that's not their work. Tracing isn't your work. Blah 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 blah. And I have kind of a couple of thoughts on, because artists use reference all the time.
Yeah.
For whatever. The one thing is either A, never show anyone your reference, because people actually get there are people getting upset that they're working over already finished drawings. You think you're getting one thing and you're really getting another as sort of a comic book reader, and I can understand that. But I've also noticed that if you're going to show if you as the artist are going to show your reference, make sure you took the reference photos. Make sure it's your. People get upset because it's not. They think it's not your work.
Right.
Like oh God, what's it? Alex Ross. You can see Alex Ross reference photos in all his books, but he takes the photos.
Yeah, Gary Gianni does that too.
Right. So, and it's like no one gets upset that Alex Ross uses photo reference, because he uses his own photos and he comes up with all his own images.
Right.
People get mad when they think you're not doing the work. And that's sort of and in their eyes, that's a little bit of fraud going on, because they think they're buying your work and they're not, as a comic book reader, and they're not buying your work. They're buying someone else's work. But it was just amazing to me that I didn't know these books, like I said, if you go to Masters of Anatomy or like I said, Master or Masters, I can't remember if it's plural, or anatomy.com, the drawings are really finished, and they sell you the book or the digital book, but they give samples of it, and then they give samples of artists using them, and some artists take it way far afield. Right. But there were some poses I recognized, but I also think they stole poses from comic book artists. They just had their artists draw those poses. But there's some great fight scene poses in there that I'm like, wow, I recognize this stuff. Yeah. There must be a lot of artists using this as reference.
Yeah, there's a lot of EC artists that would use NC Wyeth paintings that you could sell.
And artists always have their morgue where they collected reference stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think now that people can easily find, what's his name? Oh, the Marvel, Greg Horn got in trouble.
Well, Greg Horn's pretty blatant about it.
Right, exactly. Like I said, being blatant about it means people can find your reference. Which is why my advice to you is, if you can, take your own reference photos.
Yeah.
Morgue files has always been a necessity for cartoonists. Exactly. But now the problem is cartoonists don't have morgue files. They have Google Images.
Right.
And they all use the same images.
And
I guess they all
back in the 50s had access to Google Images. They would have used them too.
Mm-hmm. But the difference is, so can your average reader, and they can find your reference. Like I said, another one who doesn't get in trouble, Alex Maleev, because he takes his own reference photos. As a matter of fact, my 20 years ago, my knock on Alex Maleev was he was a bad photographer. But over the years, he's become much better. Right. And I like his stuff now because he always used to take medium shots from the front. That was his reference he used. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Greg Land got in trouble for using exactly. If people can find your references and they're not yours, that's when they get upset. If you're like Alex Ross and you take your own reference photos, even if you show them to people, they can now see that you transformed that reference photo into your art, and they appreciate that.
Al Williamson would use himself a lot in his reference photos.
Who's that?
Al Williamson.
Oh yeah, I used to use myself a lot in reference photos too, because that's who you have. You'd take Polaroids, or you'd take Polaroid, like those continuity guys all used to take pictures of each other to get an angle just right. But yeah, salesman. Yeah, Greg Land. Nobody cares. Nobody at who hires him cared that he used reference photos. They just cared that the picture looked good and sold.
Yeah, a lot of people used to get really down on Tim Bradstreet for using reference too.
Oh yeah, he, and what it is, it also depends on how much you but he took his own photos too. It depends on how much you transform the photo. Right. Like, once again, Alex Ross really transforms the photo. He makes you believe superheroes are real. So but when you see these drawings and you see the finished page by the artist, they don't I don't think they transform it enough for the general public. That's why the general public gets angry. But like I said, like as my friend Ed said, if you paid the artist more, they could probably spend more time and come up with their own images, which is exactly why they're using these reference drawings shortcuts. Yeah. Because they have a lot of drawing to do in a short period of time, and in order to make it profitable for themselves, that's what they do. I'm having trouble taking their own porn references. Oh yeah, then there's that.
Unless you're Dave Stevens.
Underage. Would it be a person carrying a gun in a photo, or just a photo of the gun when an artist is using reference for drawing a gun? No, it's a picture of a person holding a gun. Let me
depends on the artist too.
Let me see if I can share. Where is see if I can get it. Oops, I'm spelling it all wrong.
Yeah, but you do need the photo of a person holding a gun. Otherwise, you end up like Rob Liefeld in the way cable picks up guns.
Don't.
It's plural. It's mastersofanatomy.com. Let me see. How am I going to share? I know what, I'm going to put it in the other browser that I've got to read, rip, and tears in. That way I can share that browser. Let me get a new tab. Go back to StreamYard. There we go. Let me share my screen. We have to go with entire screen or window. Where did it go?
It disappeared.
Is it in the same? Yeah, it's in the same thing. Oh, there it is. Okay. Like, take a look at that pose. That's all worked out for you.
Right.
And animals, female. Actually, let me click on fighting poses. I mean, look at that. That's all worked out for you.
Yeah.
That one actually looks familiar. I think I've seen some artist use that one. Get that out of there. Hide that. There's another one there. Look at that. That one looks familiar too. I think I've seen that in Invincible.
That's a fairly generic fight scene.
Yeah, no, but that,
thing.
but it's generic now because everyone has these poses. I think that may have been taken from Invisible. I think
I'm pretty sure Eric Larson did that. So they must have copied some stuff from already existing comics to create that.
Yeah, they did that. I think that because they give you a list of artists, and I think like they had this artist copy from this one. I've definitely seen in Invincible too. They may have copied that from the Invincible artist. Who was doing it then? Ryan Otley? Or was the other guy? But I think like this one is definitely from Invincible. I recognize that style. Here's a few more. But this artist is good. They give his name here somewhere. But look, you get a book full of 2,600 of these poses. You could see how this would shorten your drawing time.
Wally Wood would have said, "This is great."
Yeah.
And you're being paid to produce pages, not to produce art.
Right. And that's why my friend Ed said, well, if you paid them more money, they maybe can come up with their own images, which I understand. I would definitely use this if I had to draw a comic a month.
Right.
I mean, why not? There's a pretty common one. And here they have them. No, here's the little drawing. This is an artist's version right here.
Right.
And they give like a few different examples of artists. There's the stars. It's like you don't even have to do realistic stuff. You can just swipe the poses. There's a little old lady doing that kick.
Mm-hmm.
So you can lay out your whole story with these poses.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of guys too probably have software where they have a human model and they can pose them.
Oh yeah, there's stuff like that too.
Ways, yeah.
And I think there's generic poses. Someone even mentioned there's poses like that in Clip Studio Paint you can grab. But I think that's also why a lot of styles look the same to me these days. Because everybody's kind of using the same reference and drawing it in the same way. There gets a general sameness to things if people all have the same reference material, which I understand them using.
Well, I think that's become more of a trend since the internet too, because I've noticed it in other a lot of science fiction concept art these days really looks the same.
Yeah.
And where in the 70s, 80s, they look radically different from each other.
And I definitely think photo reference in comics, digital has made it easier because you can draw right on a tablet. Some people are making their comics right on a tablet these days. Mm-hmm. You can put the pose right under the tablet and go to town.
I saw a video of Moebius drawn on a tablet.
there are people who could draw equipment from memory. There's also people who could draw poses from memory. Like another tweet I saw going around this week was someone was there was a tweet of Mobius was in the DC offices one day looking at Jose Garcia Lopez art. The guy who was telling the story, I think, was one of the editors there, and he said he had some, he was working with Jose Garcia Lopez, and the art was up. And so he said Mobius just wandered into his office and was looking at the art and he looked over at the editor and says, and he doesn't use photo reference? And the guy went, no, he doesn't. And Mobius just went, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
But because, he knew there's some people like Jose Garcia who know their way around the human body by memory in a way that I don't.
Yeah.
You missed everything, Comic Crack.
Yeah, you missed.
Right now we're talking a little bit about this week's Twitter controversy with Joelle Jones supposedly swiping. Most entertaining of swiping are whenever Leifeld swipes from something. See what? I am now calling all homage covers piggyback covers. That's my new phrase for them. Anytime I see one of them, I'm calling them a piggyback cover because they're piggybacking on you liking some other cover. More of your Google search is a distinction without a difference. The only distinction is now people can find your reference and they will. That's what I mean. And they'll get upset about it.
Yeah, it's like everybody has access to it instead of just...
Right, everybody has that. And in the old days, not everybody had access to your morgue. Now, if you use... And there are, Twitter sleuths, as they say, who will track down where you got your photo reference from if it's easy to find.
Oh, there's a search engine where you can do an image search to find out where it originally came from.
Yeah, you can do that too, a reverse image search. Or an image, whatever it's... Yeah, just... put the picture in, it'll find images similar. It's not hard. I'm just saying it's creatively, you're right. It's a distinction without a difference. But to the audience, there's a difference. Been reading some Garcia's work on DC Comics Presents. Art is wonderful for average story. Yeah, I was not a DC Comics guy as a kid, but he was one of those artists who I always liked and always would see his stuff and go, wow. And then in the early 80s, I actually started picking up DC Comics, and I picked up whatever he was doing. I picked up Atari Force because of Jose Garcia Lopez. Believe me, the issues without him are no good. Did this conversation tie into Damie's video about Shepard Fairley? Not quite, but sort of. Will all these artists be in the same boat as far as swiping a photographer's work? No, only because I was showing where they really took it from was there's a lot of resources for artists like mastersofanatomy.com where they sell you books you can swipe from. So the whole point is for you to use those as reference. So that's kind of different than the Shepard Fairley stuff, because we're talking about reference work that, like I said, you're supposed to use it for reference. I said this mostly jokingly, mind you. I was just watching his video today, so interesting, Jared. I hear, yeah. But like I said, if people can, my rule is if it's not reference I took, you're never going to know I used reference. If it's reference I took, I don't mind you seeing the reference. Because, people get upset when you don't do your own work. Because people respect work and get mad at shortcuts, even though they'll take the first shortcut they can in their own life, Mm-hmm. So did you read any comics this week, Paolo?
I did. And I finally am going to try to start building a Will Eisner collection.
Oh,
and
cool.
So I bought a Contract with God.
Okay.
It was cheaper because I kind of started on Will Eisner on through the wrong way. The I've read more books than I own. I've read Dropsy Avenue and I've read Signal from Space, but I only have The Name of the Game and Fagin the Jew, which are not what you usually start with, but they were available at the time, so I bought them.
I just reread Dropsy Avenue a few months ago, and that I really enjoy that. That one is so New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the name of the game is part of the Dropsy universe.
Okay.
Yeah, but Fagin the Jew is it was.
It's weird to think of a Dropsy universe.
Yeah, but yeah, it's because it's set in the neighborhood, in the building. But Fagin the Jew is David Copperfield from the point of view of Fagin.
I'm not even talking about covers. Leaflet just copies his own character poses and fight sequence. Yeah, so yeah, he's his own special kind of but he's one.
He's special.
You can't make fun of Rob Liefeld because he's one. He's a winner. He doesn't care what you think. He's one. What's Shepard Fairley video about? About NFT stuff? No, it's about Sleepy mentioned it in his video. It's about I think he said his wife worked on the documentary. There's a documentary about Shepard Fairley that came out, and they bring up his the lawsuit with his Hope Obama cover. So it was pretty interesting. A special boy, Rob Liefeld. Nope, about his Obama piece and the court case that streamed from it. Yeah. Speaking of great artists, Jared, have you seen the Tio Maro? No, I haven't seen that one. Tio Maro puts out some really good books.
Yeah, they really do.
They do. I don't have a lot of them, but I have a bunch. Matter of fact, I always say, I think it was back in the aughts when I used to buy a lot of Tio Maro's books as they came out. That's back when there weren't as many comic books for me to buy, so I'd buy the Tio Maro books, the like their back issue and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then after more comic books I started coming out, I stopped buying them because they're like $9 to $12 for a magazine now.
Yeah,
and
they're a little pricey. But
yeah, that's like 3 to 4. That's half my comic book budget for the week. And there are just so many good comic books now that I kind of like 10 years ago, I stopped buying the Tio Maro book.
Just think you could get one Tomorrow's magazine for the cost of 3 copies of Spawn.
I only got 4 comics this week. It was, which is good after the last 2 or 3 weeks of 8 to 10 comics and $45 bills. I was back to a nice $20 or actually maybe $24.
What a bargain.
Yeah. Well, one of them was a graphic novel. So Norse Mythology. This one was just terrific as usual. They got a new artist. Of course, Craig Russell is still doing the layouts.
Right.
But David Rubin is doing the art. Let me show you. I don't know who that is, but he's doing some terrific art. And the coloring on it was real interesting.
David Rubin in Spanish, I think.
Ah, okay. But terrific stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And with the there's a great dragon right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And with the Craig Russell layouts and adapting it in general, it just reads. It just reads so smoothly. I mean, very few comics read as smoothly as a Craig Russell or Stan Sakai one. I was just amazed at how smoothly this thing. I mean, and it's a story, it's another Norse story about Thor and the gods getting into trouble and hanging with a giant and going on a fishing trip. And it ends suddenly in the middle on sort of a cliff. All these kind of just end because it's really made to be a graphic novel and not 6 issues kind of thing. But it's so. Oh, there's another. Let me show you this dragon again. This is the Midgard serpent.
Mm-hmm.
That Thor tries to get on a fishing line. That's part of the story, and then kill with his hammer. But oh my goodness, this was just like, you know what it was? You'll never believe how much I paid for gas the other day. 20 issues of Spawn. I want to get the T.O. Morrow's American Comic Chronicles of the. Oh yeah, I got the one of the '60s. It was real good.
Yeah.
Oh man, it does. I think it was the '70s one. I got the one of Marvel Comics in the '60s. They went by, and it was real good. Then the '70s came out, and the reviews on it were so bad that I didn't get it, because they were like, the guy who writes this openly says he can't stand '70s Marvel comics, and his disdain for them. So I never got that one. Is apparent. But man, this is, you know what it is? In those 2 weeks when I was getting, 10 comics a week, there were a lot of B-level comics in it. Because when you buy 20 comics, you're going to get a lot of B-level comics. Which is normally, like I said, B-level comics are fine with me.
No.
You can't have all A's. That's just, the law of averages. That's fine with me. But, after 2 weeks of 15 B-level comics in those 2 weeks, reading an A-level comic like this was really, really, really good.
Yeah, that third series is going to be the last one.
What was that?
That third series is going to be the last one.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. But what a good first issue. I really like that artist. Everybody saying hi? Ruben is from A Coruña.
Coruña. So it's from Galicia.
Oh, he did a nice Beowulf adaptation.
Yeah, in Galicia they don't speak Spanish; they speak Galician, which is medieval Portuguese.
Oh wow, Coruña.
Coruña.
Okay, that A means that nya. That N with a thing over it.
The tilde.
Yeah. Screw photorealism. Ryan Rismo has an often style, bit abstract. It's very nice to see. Yeah, I like Riley Rismo. I think the last thing I got by him was, did he do Rasputin? That was a few years ago now. That was good stuff.
The Mike Mignola Rasputin series?
No, different. This is the actual Rasputin.
Okay.
Ruben is very good. Been following his stuff for almost 20 years, since he was just doing fanzines in Spain. Wow. Yeah, his stuff is his stuff is terrific in this. It really is. Like I said, and I never know how closely these guys are really following the Craig Russell layouts.
Fairly close.
I imagine they are, but that follows it. It's just so smooth. I mean, the artwork doesn't look anything like Craig Russell, but it just read like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I really was having a good time reading.
Craig knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah. Like you said, I want to see a Great Gatsby adaptation from him.
I can see that.
You're interested in photorealism? Just use a camera and produce for Maddie. See, yeah, I'm okay with photorealism. Well, most of it is naturally photorealism. It's photo reference, but that's my own precise vocabulary. People call photo reference work photorealism when it's really not. But some aspects of like photorealism do creep into like the work of Brian Hitch. But it's still really photo referenced work. And what do you call it when it's referenced to mastersofanatomy.com? Because you're not using photos, you're using drawings.
Don't know.
You need a whole new word for that.
It's sampling.
Yeah, it could be. Sampling.
Yeah. Getting music samples was harder. Beat digging used to be an art, but nowadays there's an actual database on the web where you can look up which songs used what samples.
Yeah.
Just wait till the DMCA gets a hold of that.
Oh no, they know. The thing is,
there's mechanisms in place to license stuff now.
Yeah.
It's not like the old days where
Mhm.
if you want a beat, you just go, I want that beat, I want that, and you can pay some money and use it.
Yeah, Norman Cook once offered $5 million to Steppenwolf for using a sample, and they said no.
Yeah.
Oh, there are certain artists that are notorious about saying no.
Yeah, but the good thing about when it comes to sampling, when there are a lot of guys that go for recognizable pop tunes from the 70s and 80s, Norman Cook is the type of guy that likes to dig through old soul records from the 1960s from obscure artists. So
what was that? I was just reading an article. What was that song that the Rolling Stones technically owned, but they just gave back to the artist? A 90s song. Do, 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 do. And it's like the video is this. Oh, I can't remember the name of the song.
Bittersweet Symphony.
What was it?
Bittersweet Symphony.
Bittersweet Symphony. That's it. And he used a sample from an orchestral version of a Rolling Stones song. So, and it's like, and it's just the do 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 do. So it's like, and then went through some legal process, like in the 90s, where it ended up the judge said the Rolling Stones owned the song. So and they're like a one-hit wonder too. This is their only hit song, and they never got any money from it. And the Rolling Stones never had anything to do with the music either, because they licensed their music for the orchestra to do, and the orchestra came up with that stuff. And the Rolling Stones actually just gave the rights back to this band or guy or whoever it was. And so for the first time, he's making money off this song.
Yeah, 23 years too late.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know if Radiohead ever paid to use because the Creep uses the House of the Rising Sun? No.
House of the Rising Sun is public domain. That's a 100-year-old song.
Right, so it's not House of the Rising Sun, but Creep uses the beginning of a 60s rock song.
Yeah, they might own their own version of it, but the song itself is public domain. I can draw Gigi from memory, but I have every picture of Gigi the internet and our mutual friends have, plus screen capture of his shows. I made drawings of several of those pictures and captures. Yeah, once you learn to draw a certain character, you can draw it from memory. That's when you really know it.
Creep uses a sample from the beginning of The Air That I Breathe.
Beat digging is still an art. Just have to seek out exclusively private press acetates. Bittersweet Symphony. That's I can hear it in my head now.
Yeah, because then there was another problem because there was a Dutch progressive house progressive trance act who did a cover of that song, and they decided to call their version Water Verve. So the Verve sued them for using their trademark, not the copyright, but they sued them for the trademark. So they had to market the song as Water Wave instead. Of course, that Dutch guy was really not well liked even in house music circles because he sampled a well-known Hades house hit for a second track.
That was subtle there, Terrence, but I got it.
Comic Crack making old man jokes. Gigi Allen coloring book with no brown. Someone should teach him how to spell color properly too. Get those British U's out of there. I'm an old joke, but I'm an old man. You've got to decolonialize your color. Get that U out of there. Another comic I got this week. The last Bad Idea comic, maybe. Monster Kill Squad, 4 of 4.
Mhm.
My name's in the back on the production. I don't know what their plan is for this year. I haven't had any work from them for a couple of weeks. And they said these were their last this was their last comic they're publishing. But everyone's expecting it to be a marketing gimmick somehow. But I have no idea what their plans are and when I'm getting more work from them. So we'll have to see. The U belongs in there just like pineapple on pizza.
No, it does not. I'll take the U over the pineapple on the pizza.
I like this back cover too, with the burglar guy sneaking into all the. But this series, I liked the way this series began better than the way it ended. It began a bunch of monster fighters, and their introduction was pretty cool. But then they just kind of fought monsters for the last 2 issues, and that was it. I don't know what I was expecting. It was solidly done. Nothing wrong with it. Some good art by Tomas Giorello. Some terrific coloring. Nice stuff. But I think Odin's Eye was my favorite. Might have been my favorite series from them. Though I like the 2 one-shots too.
Gotcha.
But we'll have to see what Bad Idea does next, because I don't know. Bum, 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 bum. Want to do a, let's get a Reed, Rip, and Slab in there. I have a few made up. Bum, bum. Let's go there. Let's pick, hold on. 1945 September. There we go. I did all old ones this week. 1945 September. Black Terror, number 12. Blue Bolt, number 61. Police Comics, number 48.
Ooh.
Now the Europeans are all going to have to pick the rugby game.
Yeah, slab Blue Bolt.
No background.
Yeah, I'm gonna slab Blue Bolt, read Black Terror, and rip Police Comics.
Rip Police Comics. It's got Plaz in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's got Plaz in it.
You don't like Plaz? I think
No.
is that post
Jack Cole.
Jack Cole Plaz?
If it's 1945. Yeah, I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, but I want to read Black Terror because I want to find out how if that thing really is as crazy as I've heard.
Giant Television. Yeah, I've never read.
And yeah,
Slab Police, read Black Terror, and rip Blue Bolt.
I think I agree with Fenner.
But the Blue Bolt has the best cover, which is why I want to slab it.
I don't know. I think Black Terror's cover is better.
Yeah.
It's definitely more attractive, but I think Blue Bolt is the one that's more balanced, I'd say.
Okay.
All 3 of them have yellow backgrounds and a little bit of red. And something around it.
I think I'm going to slab the Black Terror, rip Police Comics, and read the Blue Bolt, because I want to see what a comic book about a rugby game is like.
It looks like soccer. Is that
that could be soccer. That's a round ball. They just have rugby jerseys, it looks like. And they're knocking each other over.
Well, in the 1940s, those would be soccer shirts, but they're not supposed to have the numbers at the front.
They got them on the front and the back. And 2 guys on the same team are fighting for the ball. What kind of conflict is that?
That happens a lot, actually.
And the one guy's jumping off the other guy, it looks like.
Yeah.
Those teammates don't look very teammatey. Let's see. We got Slab Police, read Black Terror. We have to tear up Blue Bolt.
I agree with the guys.
Rip Blue Bolt, read Police, and rip.
Well, you have to
rip in Blue Bolt and Black Terror. What's
no. He's explaining his slabs Black Terror.
I'm to smoking pipes. I am to buttons. Slab Black Terror. There we go. Yeah, that's pure Jack Cole. Okay, I was just checking because I actually I don't
Who's
have
the
them.
guy inside the soap bubble?
I used to have all the archives of Plaz, but I sold them a few years ago. If that Play Comics has Jack Cole art, then makes sweet love to it. It does. Jack Cole and Lou Fine. Ah, boy, I tore up that one.
He's so beside himself, he just disappeared.
I got kicked out.
There you go.
I gotta go back and share again too, just so I can see those covers. Jack Cole and Lou Fine, but yeah, that's some good stuff. Karma. That's what I get for ripping up police comics. I do like. Have you any of you guys read any Black Terror ever?
I've read articles about it, but I've never read the actual book itself.
I must have read about it
in Terra Obscura, which is a spin-off from Tom Strong.
Did like IDW or Dynamite put out a Black Terror comic?
Yeah, in their superhero universe where they use those characters which are in the public domain.
Paulo does not think Cole stuff is wonderful. He does not like Plastic Man.
I do not like Plastic Man.
Have you ever read Jack Cole's Plastic Man? Because it's completely different.
No. I've read one of the 70s stories.
Oh,
and then I've read Plastic Man in modern context.
Okay, then you don't know you don't know Plastic Man.
How did Plastic Man get his powers?
I forget. I know I read it. Drinking from a rubber tree and a rubber this and a rubber that. There was something going on.
Well, here's my question about Plastic Man. All right, so he can stretch. How did he get his uniform to stretch like that?
I don't know. I don't know if they answered those questions in the 40s, but it may have been made of rubber because he's the Indian rubber man. So it may have. I remember there was some formula he drank made from all sorts of rubber stuff.
No, that was elongated men.
Oh, okay. I'm confusing them then. But Plastic Man, the difference between classic Jack Cole Plastic Man and modern Plastic Man is he's the straight man. And Jack Cole Plastic Man is the straight man, and everybody around him is zany. Woozy Winks, his sidekick, is when they made Plastic Man the comedy relief character in the 70s, and he's been that ever since, and he never was. He was the straight man who fought crime. So it's like they changed the whole dynamic. Dynamite did for the Superpowers books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bought the first series, but then I didn't. But then they decided we're going to have spin-offs, and that thing doesn't make sense as spin-offs.
The Plastic Man was more of a classic crime book. Than he was a. Than he was any kind. So it's like the modern Plastic Man is a completely different beast.
Yeah. Because my first contact with Plastic Man was actually the cartoon series from Hanna-Barbera.
Nobody who likes the old Jack Cole Plastic Man likes current Plastic Man at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the old Jack Cole stuff is really good if you ever get a chance to read it. But I don't think I've ever seen. I remember seeing in my childhood seeing the Black Terror in the Steranko History of Comics books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
But I don't think I've ever seen any collections of the stuff.
Oh, Guadanaland might have some.
Yeah, Quality Golden Age was a one. Yeah. What's the inspiration for his sunglasses? I do not remember. I don't know if there was any besides design.
Yeah, he was wearing those goggles 30 years before Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Plaz. Yeah, but Woozy Winks was his sidekick character. His comedy sidekick character. And now Plastic Man is the comedy sidekick character.
Hmm.
Bringing up Kareem, did you know that he wrote a Sherlock Holmes novel?
Really?
Yes,
He did.
Sure did.
Did not know that.
No, that is unexpected.
No, it's evidently it was pretty well received. He's a pretty decent writer.
Cool.
I was a bit. I'm still am, but I haven't watched it in a while. A big fan of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes BBC TV show.
That's who a lot of people consider to be the definitive Holmes.
I really enjoy that. But there's one line from it, not by Holmes, that has always stuck with me. That I'm like, what is that? They have It was one of the villains of the piece. I forget which story it is even.
That's right.
But he's angry at Holmes for getting in his way and starting to ruin his plans. So he's mumbling to himself, and he says, "Holmes the meddler, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office," and I'm like, it's Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office. I'm like, Jack in office? Is he calling Sherlock Holmes a jack off? That's the only thing I can think that is. I'm like, what the heck?
But you may be onto something there.
Like, what is calling someone a jack in office?
I don't know. Let's find out.
I had never heard that before. It stuck with me. I've never heard what it is since then either. Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The meaning of Jack in office is an insolent fellow in authority.
Ah, look
like
at that.
A low-level clerk.
Okay.
I mean, now that you bring it up, it may be
it makes sense in that context, but I was always baffled by that one.
It may be an intentional, insinuation there.
So he's calling Holmes a second-rate mercenary from the Scotland Yard, even though Lestrade was really not that impressed by Holmes's antiques.
Plas got his powers via chemical spill on an open gunshot wound. That's right. I think he was originally a criminal too, but when he became Plastic Man, I think he became a good guy.
I guess that same chemical must have got on his uniform and gave him super stretchy ability.
It was before the days of the radiation, the atomic age, when radiation caused all your powers. So chemical spills had to take care of all that.
Or you didn't have uniforms made out of unstable molecules.
One of the greatest fake inventions ever.
Yeah.
Explain stuff with a simple 2-word phrase. Unstable molecules take care of that. Good old Reed Richards. I wonder if Stan Lee came up with that one or Jack Kirby. I think Stan Lee did, but it doesn't have alliteration in it.
I don't really know.
I'm gonna go with Kirby on that one.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kirby was a really big science fiction nut too. So
the only reason I would think it was Stan Lee was because he put the actual words in, but the reason against it is there's no alliteration.
He would have used malleable molecules.
Now let's see. The third comic I got this week was the new issue of Radiant Black, which was the story of this other teammate, Radiant Pink, or whoever it is. And she's mostly some sort of Twitch. It gives her sort of origin story, which isn't much of an origin story. She's this kind of Twitch gamer who is trying to make her living making gaming videos on Twitch.
Right. And
she's actually got a sponsor who makes cookies. And the whole first 3/4 of the book is her going through her life. Her cat breaks her microphone and she's trying to get a new one because she's got a big marathon thing going on, but messes it up. And she's under this pressure to make money for the So it's just kind of a slice of life story in the beginning. And then it turns out this is the She goes to like the local box store to see if they got a new microphone, and they're all sold out. And this is the guy working at the local box store, and she's like, "Can you fix my microphone?" Da-da. He's like, "I can fix it after work. We don't really fix things here, and I got to work the rest of the day." And she's finally like, "Okay, you'll fix it after work." But then she goes throughout the rest of her day, and she's panicking. And this, so she goes back before the end of his shift and says, "Really? Can you take a break and fix it now?" Then he's like, "Sure, sure, I can fix it. Come on over." He's like, "Want to go to the donut shop and fix it with me?" She's like, "Sure." And all of a sudden, he goes over to this like closed donut shop. And she's like, "What are you, a serial killer bringing me into a closed donut shop?" He's like, "No, I'm doing the electrical work here, blah, blah, blah." But it turns out like the radiant black guy, the star of the book, this like orb from space came down and he touched it and he got this radiant black powers. And then he found out there's these other people too, different colors with the different powers. So it turns out this guy he's
Green Lantern.
No, he's radiant yellow. And he's just like, "Oh, this other orb came down too. I think you're supposed to touch it." She's like, "What?" Like, I think you're the one they chose for. So she just touched it and became radiant pink. I'm like, what? So they sent 2 orbs to this guy and he just kept one in a store until he met the right person. It was just a weird origin story.
Yeah.
So in the end, do they all combine and summon a giant robot and fight Rita Repulsa?
I think they already did that. in an earlier issue, if I'm like, when some big villain was up, they kind of combined their well, his influences are obvious. It's not he said in this, "I kind of wanted to do my own Power Rangers thing with all the influences of that stuff." Mm-hmm. So he's not. They're not pretending they're doing anything but their own sort of superhero Power Rangers story. But it's well done, and I think they've got a couple of spin-offs coming out. They've actually, I don't know if I want to buy any of the spin-offs, but they've got like another one that ties into their universe, and they may have a special or two.
They'll do a psychedelic 60s special and call it Radiant Paisley.
They already did. Matter of fact, I think Terrence Comic Crack got it. Yeah. Last issue, they did a special black light issue, which was their regular issue printed with black light inks or something like that. Okay. You can get it for $10 or $15 now on eBay, but I didn't see it. You probably paid cover price for it around.
And they'll do an 80s variant that's day glow colors.
But Radiant Black, once again, it's another book that's a solid B. I got a lot of solid B books these days. I need to find some more A's, but they're kind of rare. Listen, back in the days, like in the aughts, when I was buying all that Tio Morrow stuff, there were some weeks there'd be nothing or one comic on my pull list. Right. So I'm glad to have all these B books to choose from because I didn't used to. Certainly didn't. Let's do another Rip, Read, or Tear. Why not? I got it set up. Let's go to...
Yeah, you did, Terrence.
Let's go to 1978 Marvel. Did I miss some LB Cole? No, you missed Jack Cole.
Or Jack Cole.
Not LB.
Not Old King either.
1970, some sort of mediocre 1978 Marvel.
Oh, there's nothing mediocre about Master of Kung Fu.
That's I don't know. I think those are the issues a lot of people don't like. I think that's a Dave Cockrum issue.
Mm-hmm.
The Captain Marvel Pat Broderick issue.
Yeah, I actually like Pat Broderick. That Master of Kung Fu might be from a long-running storyline.
Ah.
I met Pat Broderick years and years ago.
Oh, okay. And I forget who drew that Daredevil.
I have no idea.
Oh, Slab DD, Reed Master, and Rip Cap. We got another Slab Captain Marvel. We went from a Rip to a Slab. Reed Master of Kung Fu and Rip Daredevil. What do we got here? Slab Master of Kung Fu, read Captain Marvel, and rip Daredevil.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I agree with Gus again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna slab Master of Kung Fu, read Daredevil, and rip Captain Marvel.
See that foot on the Shang-Chi's, the foreshortening on that Master of Kung Fu cover leaves me a little cold.
Yeah, now that you bring it up, that foot does look a little wonky.
But I'm kind of curious.
That one leg looks a lot longer than the other one.
It's supposed to. It's Kirby style.
Yeah.
Archive.com has Black Terror. Oh, okay. I'll have to check that out. Read DD, slab Master of Kung Fu, and rip Cap.
Yeah.
And you know what? This cover, the Captain Marvel cover, looks like it's going for sort of a classic cover, sort of confrontation thing, but it's just missing on the execution. You could see how that might be a classic cover if it was just done a little bit better. I think the best cover is the Daredevil one. Is that Gene Colan, Daredevil?
Don't know.
I think that's Gene Colan, Daredevil. That's so little, but yeah, that's Gene Colan, Daredevil.
Those shards of glass look just enough to make it look like the guy's wearing Captain Boomerang's outfit.
I think I'm going to slab Daredevil.
That is a Gene Colan cover.
Yeah.
Although the inks are by Klaus Jensen, but they look very, very smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not scratchy like Klaus's inks.
Yeah, and Roger McKenzie's already writing, so.
Right. This is just before I started buying it regularly. I think I started with, was it maybe an issue or two after this? Though I had a bunch of issues before it, but I started.
The thing I really want to read that because I want to read what Roger McKenzie's like without Frank Miller. I've never read that.
Not nearly as good. Master of Kung Fu Pose is pretty weak. Yeah. I read a bunch of the when Frank Miller took. I was lucky enough to be buying Daredevil. I just started buying Daredevil, and I'd read plenty of back issues at that point. When Miller took over, it was a real change in quality. It wasn't long before I knew Miller was something special. There was only like 2-3 issues, and I was like, "Wow, this is getting good. Miller is something special."
Gotcha.
Then when McKenzie stopped writing it, it got really good. But I think I'm reading Captain Marvel and ripping Master of Kung Fu. Hello, Lillian. We all say hello. She agrees with you on the read, rip, and slab. Ah. So Lillian also wants to slab DD, read Master, and rip Cap. I was slabbing DD also, but I was ripping Master and reading Cap.
Yeah, the thing about those Captain Marvel issues, while I like Pat Broderick's art, I don't think that the stories are that memorable.
I don't remember any of them, I'll have to agree with you.
Yeah, I remember that they were going through Jim Starlin's trash can.
Yeah. I started buying the Jim Starlin issues were back issues to me. But my friend who was a couple of years older than me, this is in the late 70s, said to me, "You have to read Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel," and he lent me his issues, and I read them and loved them. But they were, like I said, they were a few years old at this point. So I started buying Captain Marvel off the stands, I think just before Pat Broderick got on. And I may have had a few of those issues, and they were mediocre. I think Al Milgrom drew a bunch of them.
He did.
And they were mediocre. And when Pat Broderick came on, it was really a step up. But then it was one of those things where like, oh, here's this, what year did this came out? 78. So I was 12 years old, and I was very aware of artists by this time. And I was like, oh, here's this cool new artist. He's an up and comer. I like his stuff. But then he never I don't know how many issues he drew. He drew it for at least a year, I think. He did a good amount of issues, but they never quite got better. So it was one of those things where I need some blue wrenches in here, Jack. Yeah. I kick some people out. Yeah, Lillian started ripping some of Dad's comics. Hold on a second there. Even me? Yeah, but like I said, I always expected like the Pat Broderick comics to get better as time went along, and they didn't quite. Like, you know how I was also like I was there for I was just talking about how I was there for the beginning of Miller, and his comics got better as he did more of them.
Right.
And I was there for the Byrne Claremont X-Men, and their comics got better as they did more of them. And the Pat Broderick, I forget who wrote these.
I can't remember. Steve Englehart was there before Broderick became the artist.
And he certainly and it certainly they certainly were a step up from what they used to be, but they just never got better, and they just kind of plateaued and were just okay, and it got canceled. That was a lot of good sources of porn reference. Yep. Bum, 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 bum. But like, late 70s Marvel is my kid wheelhouse because I was 12 when those came out.
Broderick went on to work on Micronauts too.
Yeah, some good stuff on there. I enjoyed his Micronauts. I even enjoyed his Micronauts redo that he did like in the aughts with Devil's Due.
We don't talk about that.
There was one thing about Broderick's Captain Marvel that I never quite understood. What was the deal with that mask with the hair going all over it at the back?
I don't even remember.
Because Starling drew the mask regularly,
right? And
going to
at the top, kind of.
Yeah, but Broderick drew the hair all over the mask. You just saw the mask here at the front.
I think it was still just coming at the top. He just had much longer hair.
Yeah, but it should bunch up.
My hair never bunches up. If you got straight hair, it doesn't.
Have you tried wearing a mask like that?
If I did, it would just fall. It would. My hair is straight. My hair doesn't even feather back nicely like Captain Marvel's did. If I wore a mask and stuck my hair out the top, it would just fall over straight. That's all.
You never would get a job doing modeling back in the 70s since your hair wouldn't feather, right?
I would have to be the late 60s with all the long, straight-haired women. That's what I would have to be. And the last comic I got for the week was another one of these one-shots by Aftershock. Dark Red. This one by Tim Seeley and Corin Howell.
For the name.
And I haven't read anything by Tim Seeley in a while. And this is, I'll read the back to you a little. Rural vampire Chip wants nothing more than to return to his life of quiet isolation, but his past has other plans. I'm not really a huge fan of vampire stories. They're usually just okay with me, and this one was okay. There's it's about a vampire who actually takes place in the current day. He got turned to a vampire in France during World War II. So he's visiting his friend. He found out his friend is on his deathbed. Who's another World War II vet who's like 100 years old and dying. Yeah. And he can only travel at night. And so to get to his friend's side. And then this nun walks in. And it turns out she's a nun who fights demons and voodoo things. Because she knows voodoo too. And so she and the vampire guy have... And also the guy who died... His mother made a deal with the devil, or they call him here the adversary, who I think is what they call him in the Bible too. She made a deal with the devil to get her son to live through World War II. Well, what she didn't know was the price of saving her son wasn't her soul, it was her son's soul. So now the nun and the vampire have to journey to hell to save this guy's soul. And it's a setup for more stories too. But it was like, oh, there's another dad joke from Comic Crack. Ooh. Straight hair is no place in comics, only 9 binary hair.
Yeah. He says that in a very humorous vein, too.
I figured.
But his favorite superhero is Capillary America.
But 40 pages, graphic novel / magazine size for $7. I've been picking these up as a matter of course, just because like they're I like that they're all done in ones, even though it's set up to do more stories if they want to do more stories.
I like that it's oversized.
I like that it's over. I usually don't like square bound, but square bound at magazine size is okay with me because it still opens up nicely. Right. Like I said, I don't know who this artist is. Corin Howell. Let's see what does it say he did. Ghostbusters, X-Files Origins, Scully, Batmite.
What an odd combination.
Oh, and this is the next chapter in the epic tale of horror and adventure that is Dark Red. Oh, I think I bought a Dark Red first issue now that I remember this. And I didn't buy any more because it was a vampire story. Yeah, I did buy Dark Red #1, I think. It must have come out from Aftershock a couple of years ago. But like I said, 40 page. It's a 48-page package, but it comes with 40 pages of comic, and then a bunch of ads and stuff in the back. Well, ads for their other books. So, oh yeah, there's Oh, looks like there's 10 issues of Dark Red. You can get a 10-issue collection of hardcover collection of Dark Red. Okay. Do the same guys do it? I don't think. Yeah, Tim Seeley and Corin Howell. The only complaint about this is I didn't really like the font that the letterer made or chose. They often say you only notice the lettering when you don't like it. I noticed the lettering because I didn't like the font. I don't know what I didn't like about it. Looks a little too mechanical for me, maybe, but minor quibble. Good thing I have magazine-sized bags for Dark Red.
You get some magazine-sized Mylar.
Mm-hmm. I have all my epics in magazine-sized Mylar. I bought some of those once.
Yeah, I need to get some magazine-sized Mylar.
I need to get some Mylar. So I haven't bought Mylar in a decade. I transferred about 4,000 comics over to Mylar in the aughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then haven't had the extra money to buy Mylar anymore.
Right.
Because when I buy Mylar, I call up E. Gerber and get it, and it costs about, I spend about $200 on Mylar.
So you buy it in bulk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like $25 for 50 sheets, and you can get it for half that price if you call E. Gerber.
Yeah.
But it's weird. You have to actually call them. You can't buy from their website or anything. You have to. Everybody's like, "What? I have to call them?" And you get some secretary it's not even her job to take orders except when someone calls, and she's like, it's like you're bothering her. Is lettering done by hand? No, the letter it's digital lettering. It's clearly a font. It's the font I didn't care for.
Stan Sakai still does hand lettering.
Yeah, he does. I think a couple of people. Walter Simonson has his Ragnarok hand lettered.
Yeah, John Workman still does it.
Right. I have a reprint of the Star-Lord first appearance. I don't have the actual magazine. I think they did a Star-Lord special. Well, they did one in the 80s and in the 90s where they colored it and reprinted it.
Yeah, the one in the 80s was where they first published it as color.
Okay.
And funny thing, because it was for the magazine, the original magazine, as I believe Bob Larkin cover.
Mm-hmm.
The reprint from the 80s as a Terry Austin cover, and the reprint from the 90s finally has, for the first time, a John Byrne cover. So it's the first time. So even though that story, which is Star-Lord's second appearance, is drawn by Byrne,
Mm-hmm.
Byrne only drew a cover for it in the 15 years later.
Yeah, I remember enjoying Byrne's Star-Lord. The one better system for all his magazines. Yeah. They're not that easy to get to right now. Yeah, that's always. I have most of my magazines on shelf, but I keep most of my comics on shelves and magazines too. But I don't have a ton of magazines.
Yeah, I believe that 2, 4 from Marvel Preview, number 2, 4, 7, and 11 might be a little more expensive. Number 2 as the Punisher's first solo story.
Oh, okay.
Number 4 is the first Star-Lord, although it's by Steve Englehart and Steve Gann. Number 7 has the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon, but it's still set in the Sword in the Star world. And number 11 is that Claremont Byrne Star-Lord story.
You know what magazines I've actually wanted to read recently? I've had for some reason I've had a hankering to read Savage Sword of Conan.
I saw a video. There's a guy that has a miniatures company where he makes gaming miniatures and stuff. He actually bought a complete run. I think it was on eBay, of Savage Sword of Conan.
Wow.
And it was shipped in like 6 giant boxes.
Wow.
And they all arrived at the same time. It was a big stack of boxes, and he's doing an unboxing video. Like,
wow.
A lot of Conan.
Yeah.
275 issues plus 275 is the monthly Conan.
Yeah, that's the monthly Conan.
Savage Sword was over 200. It was over 200 issues.
Yeah, but over 200. Yeah, over 200 issues. So yeah.
I think I only have like anywhere between 5 and 12 issues left. I got rid of my Savage Swords a long time ago.
I still have all mine.
I don't.
But I've probably got about half of them.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to. I don't know why it's. Lately, I've been feeling the urge to. Cause I even have a whole bunch of them digitally, but I don't want to read them digitally.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm gonna flip through some magazines. My LCS friend told me Savage Sword was a comic he wanted to read and hide under his bed from his parents. They had some nudity in them.
Sometimes,
yeah. But since I like never go back issue buying, I never get these back issues that I. Because Savage Sword of Conan is something you see people buy. Oh, they're at some store, they'll buy a few issues of it for a few dollars in the back issue bin.
Right.
Otherwise, they're like, $10 a piece on eBay or something. It's like,
It's like what we were talking about earlier with those, heavy metals and epics being all over the place. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think I ever finished my thought when we were talking about Mile High Comics. His whole idea for the Mile High website was to make it easy for people to buy sort of mid-range, cheap comics like we're talking about here, Savage Sword of Conan, stuff that's only in the low dollar range, but that people want. But they can't find because those aren't the comics anyone brings to a comic convention.
Show. Yeah.
So that's why he set up his whole system so that he'd easily be able to tell which comics were in demand.
Right.
For like $4 or $5 a piece.
If I had a dime for every time I asked a vendor at a comic show, I was like, "Do you have any of these?" Well, I've got them back at my shop.
Yeah, exactly. That was always the problem. That was the audience he was trying to serve.
Yeah.
And that's why he said that his employees would always go to comic conventions and go through everybody's dollar boxes or whatever, looking for the issues he knew he could sell because of his website. Out of the 100 books there worth $1 to $4, he knew which 10 he could sell for $5 on his website.
Right. Yeah.
Because that often happens. There's like 2 or 3 issues you're missing, and they're only dollar books, but you can't find them. And you'd be willing to pay $5 to get that last issue. You don't even care.
I agree.
Not to pay $1. Yeah, they're everywhere, those Conan mag. I just don't go everywhere is my problem. Because like I said, I'm never looking for back. I go to my LCS each week, and then I come home. It's like I don't even look at. I'm such a current comic buyer, and I get the I get a lot of trades and stuff. I usually get for my birthday or something.
But just think, between New York and New Jersey is packed full of comic shops.
Yeah.
Think of how many comic shops you have within a driving distance of you.
Like I said, the problem is always there was always one vendor at Emerald City that had old comics that were reader grade at cheap prices. They were the ones to go get reading grade copies of old comics. There are quite a few. More block user. There are quite a few, but it's always weird when I think of what's in driving distance, because New York City is 35 miles away from me. Anywhere else, that would be driving distance.
Right.
That ain't driving distance.
Yeah.
Long Island, that puts Long Island at what, 45 miles away from me? But you have to go through New York City to get to Long Island. And I'm sure there are tons of comic shops in Long Island. But that's not driving. So it's like a big chunk of driving distance for me isn't driving distance.
Yeah, the New Jersey is packed full of comic shops.
Yeah. And it's like I always think of whenever I look at what comic shops are near, you go to like Comic Shop Locator or something. Mm-hmm. And they also put like, I'm right next to the Hudson River. So like they always put like Ossining comic shops as nearby, which they are. They're like 15 miles away.
Right.
But the Hudson River is in between me and them. So it's like that all of a sudden you got to do a bridge crossing and drive twice the distance, because it's not if I had a hang glider, I could make it there faster. So it's like what's driving distance to me isn't always as clear cut.
Driving time versus driving distance.
Right, because of the Hudson River and New York City.
See, what you do is you talk to somebody else into driving while you sleep.
There you go. Like if I really wanted to go search for back issues through shops, I could probably find a lot more than your average person could.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I'd have to be, willing to go into new places.
Right.
Like Koch Warehouse. Koch Warehouse is technically within driving distance from me. I would guess that if driving distance with no traffic, if I could go in the middle of the day with light traffic, Koch Warehouse is probably 45 minutes from me. If I have to go on the Cross Bronx Expressway when there's traffic, which is 23 hours a day,
couple hours,
it might be an hour and 45 minutes from me. You guys, the cross. You guys have probably never driven on the Cross Bronx Expressway, of course.
No, I have not.
It's one of the most singular driving experiences I've had, because I get right. I go down the Palisades Parkway, which is a normal parkway. You'd recognize, you have parkways like this wherever you are.
Yeah.
Cross the George Washington Bridge, and you're on the Cross Bronx Expressway. And it's old in that, what's his name? The power broker built it.
J.P. Morgan.
The big New York City Transit Authority guy. Oh, Trump's mentor.
Yeah.
And it just it cuts through everything. It's got a lot of lanes. It's like 2 lanes on one side, 2 lanes on the other side, sometimes spreading out to 3 lanes, exits coming on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like a canal than a highway, because there's no neighborhood around it. You're like driving through infrastructure.
Right.
And there's stuff going over the top of you. There's walls rising up on the side, and it's all old. It's not pretty in the least.
I see what you mean.
The road is, it's always got traffic. So the road looks 50 years old. It's not like new smooth pavement.
Yeah.
There's like patches everywhere. There's beams and sideways, and there's huge people are coming on seemingly out of nowhere, because they're coming out of the on-ramps are all coming from actual neighborhoods which are walled off. Right. It's just such a weird landscape. And I just every time I drive it, which is not that often, once a year before COVID, going to Long Island, I'm always like, you couldn't the infrastructure, you couldn't build that today. It's like the infrastructure, it would be like building the Big Dig in Boston or something like that.
Well, see, that's the last when I was in Boston, we went to a convention with Charles Best. We were up there while they were doing the Big Dig. The traffic there was actually worse there than it was in New York City.
Oh yeah, I imagine so.
It was awful. I was glad Charles was driving, because it's like,
but I'd be coming home from Long Island. Mm-hmm. Usually, my friend, they usually had a Memorial Day party, so it's in May, and the Monday is the holiday. So I'd be coming home Sunday night at 10:30. I'd be on the Cross Bronx, and it's packed. Not traffic jam packed like it is coming in, but still packed. And it's just like, I'm always like, wow, it is just amazing at 10:30 on a Sunday night, and here are 1,000 people and 1,000 cars and I driving down this highway at the exact same moment. It's like that is just crowded. I've been in Boston before and after the big tunnels. Very different city. Yeah, I haven't been there often. Boston was. I drove in Boston once in the 80s, and it was nuts. It was because it's all paved horse paths, and what it is driving in Manhattan is actually pretty easy, because through most of it it's a grid, so you don't have to figure out much stuff. Driving in Westchester is a little crazy, which is north of it. Westchester is on the other side of the Hudson from me, and there's all sorts of highways, and the highways all merge and split off. So you're going down one highway, and all of a sudden it becomes 3 highways, and then the 3 highways all split off again, and you better be in the right lane or you're on the wrong highway. So that's kind of nuts. But Boston you'd come to an intersection, and it's 5 roads from all different directions intersecting. And there's a traffic light right in front of you. There's a traffic light across from you. There's a traffic light kind of in the middle. And you're like, what traffic light am I supposed to look at? Took Boston 30 years to complete their underground highway system. Yeah. That, like I said, it would if you had to build the Cross Bronx again, it would take 30 years. There's just that much infrastructure on the thing, and it looks all cobbled together. It's crazy to see. And I think of war-torn countries, and I'm like, man, it'd be great to destroy all this infrastructure and then have to rebuild it again. That's a crazy amount of work. Crazy. So that's what I always think of when I see these war-torn countries. I just feel so sorry for them. I'm like, man. And having that infrastructure would be such like an advantage in any kind of war. It'd be like, no wonder they blow up infrastructure first.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. War-torn comics. Don't blow up my comics. Please
Don't
have.
slap your city. Yeah.
So Paolo's falling asleep, so I guess we should wrap up here.
I have been so tired.
Yeah. I've been a little tired this week too. But I fell asleep during the afternoon. I was working and I sat down for a minute and I fell asleep for half an hour and was like, oh,
I can't do that. No, I even have work tomorrow. I only have one day. I had 3 days off last weekend.
Ah.
I had Monday off, so I only have one day off this weekend, which is Sunday.
Ah. Hey, at least you can watch the Super Bowl.
What for? Now, this week, Asian Le Mans Series starts in Dubai.
Ah.
And there's Formula E in Mexico. NASCAR starts the following week.
That's right. My sister Jennifer watches NASCAR, so I hear all about NASCAR.
Yeah, but NASCAR's gotten very, very boring since they adopted that stupid segment racing. It's annoying as fuck. And the IndyCar, on the other hand, it's a shame that it's not getting any popularity back because they're going to have 25 or 26 cars this year. It's going to be amazing. The kids are taking over the series, and so it's going to be. I hope it's going to be very, very tight. And then they're going to introduce a new car for 2023 with hybrid engine, and we're going to go back to crazy horsepower.
Paolo's looking forward to some crazy horsepower.
So Crazy Horse is going to be powering the car, right?
Yeah. Indy cars used to have 1,000 horsepower back in the early 70s.
What made the horsepower go down? Safety?
Yeah, they introduced a pop-off valve for the turbocharger, so the turbocharger now can't recirculate air with the same pressure, so it doesn't produce extra power when the air gets thrown back to the cylinders.
Saul wants them to go electric.
No, you don't. Nobody wants to go electric. Believe me, I test drive electric in hybrid cars for a car magazine.
I have a friend who I went to college with who does that. He worked for Car and Driver for a while before he got laid off. Now I think he's working for another car thing.
We have a smart road concept they're testing around here, and I see driverless cars just about every day.
His name is Matt Tierney. Look him up on my Facebook friends. You'll have something in common with. I don't know him that well. I haven't seen him since college, but I know he does car stuff, design, and works on car magazines and such things.
Germany and England want to get rid of the internal combustion engine cars by, was it 35 or so?
Yeah, European countries will phase out electric car, new electric car sales between 2030 and 2040, depending on the country.
You mean combustion engine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we won't be able to sell new cars with combustion engines, and diesels are already being banned from inner cities. Even though all delivery vehicles are diesels.
Yeah, I think
so. They have to go in the city.
Yeah, I think Rome's had a ban on that for a few years now.
Yeah, but our diesel is much better than yours. Ours doesn't have sulfur, so it's not as pollutant.
Our diesel has sulfur?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's say goodnight. Have a good night out there, everyone.
Bye.
Had fun. We will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.